Subcommittee will come to order, and good afternoon to everybody. At a recent House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, North Korea defector Ambassador Tae Young-ho testified about the strategic value of both disseminating information into North Korea and the protection of North Korean refugees in China. Drawing on an analogy about the fall of the Berlin Wall, Ambassador Tae claimed that there may be a similar result if China stopped repatriations of refugees in the United States and the international community, expanded soft power news and information flows into North Korea. It was very dramatic in his testimony and couldn't be clearer just what a game changer it would be if the refugees could find a place of refuge in China, and then on to other places like South Korea and other places where freedom flourishes. Drawing on this hearing will explore the current situation facing North Korean asylum seekers and assess both China's obligation to protect, a legal obligation to protect refugees, and the effectiveness of global efforts to stop what the UN Commission on Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea called crimes against humanity experienced by refugees. As the Congress continues to look at ways to best apply maximum diplomatic and financial pressure on the regime of Kim Jong-un, this hearing will explore the strategic relevance of further pressing the Chinese government to protect North Korean refugees and evaluate the impact of surging outside information into North Korea will have. Amid escalating tensions on the Korean Peninsula, we cannot forget those suffering under the North Korean regime and those North Korean refugees who are in China. North Korean asylum seekers are at imminent risk of repatriation, torture, sexual violence, forced abortions, hard labor, and even execution. China's repatriations of the North Koreans is a stark violation of both the spirit and the letter of the Refugee Convention and the 1967 protocol to which China has acceded. The Chinese government has a lot to answer for. It is no wonder that the UN Commission on Inquiry for North Korea Human Rights concluded that the government of the People's Republic of China is aiding and abetting in crimes against humanity by forcibly repatriating North Korean refugees. I would note that as many as 90% of North Korean women, refugees in China, today fall prey to traffickers who will sell the refugees into sexual slavery or forced marriages. Suzanne Schulte, who will testify during this hearing, previously brought women in who were refugees from North Korea, Mrs. Ma and others, who for the first time told the story about how they were exploited inside of China and forced into sex trafficking. It was just horrific testimony, but an eye-opener about how they went from a exploitation in North Korea into exploitation into China. Labor trafficking is also pervasive. The government of North Korea and the government and businesses in China, Russia, and elsewhere in the world profit from the trafficking of North Korean laborers. In recent months, Chinese authorities reportedly deported hundreds of South Korean missionaries and NGO workers who have provided crucial help to the North Korean refugees in China. So the people providing that assistance have been ousted as well. The international community, especially the United Nations, the Trump administration, and the U.S. Congress, must insist that China honor its treaty obligations and end its egregious practice of systematic repatriation of North Korean refugees. I would note parenthetically, I have raised this repeatedly with now the Secretary General, but the former head of the UNHCR, and never got a good answer. So the UN really needs to step up to the plate here. Chinese officials and businesses complicit in repatriation of North Korean refugees or those who profit from labor trafficking should also be held accountable. The Congress has given the administration the sanctioned tools that if used would send the right message and especially hold people to account, whether it be through the North Korean Sanctions Enforcement Act, the Global Magnitsky Act, or those sanctions attached to China's Tier 3 designation for trafficking in persons. All should be used strategically and swiftly to send a clear message. For too long, the world has tolerated China's failures to protect refugees and those complicit in repatriations of refugees who profit from the trafficking of North Koreans should be held accountable. The ending of repatriation should be a bellwether for judging China's willingness to curtail Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions. In addition to the protection of North Korean refugees, this hearing will also assess global efforts to surge news and information into North Korea. Expansion of existing efforts to disseminate information into North Korea is especially important, for nothing else than to tarnish and undermine the Kim family cult of personality, where they are lifted up as gods. The Kim family cult must be taken seriously as a national security threat and a barometer of Kim Jong-un's power. The cult of personality, sometimes called Juche, has inspired devotion from the North Korean people because of the cradle-to-grave propaganda that they endure. We must undermine the Kim family cult and the big lies upon which it's based, and the propaganda that grants Kim Jong-un almost godlike status. This status has allowed 3 generations of the Kim family to starve and abuse the North Korean people and divert scarce resources to the military and to their nuclear programs. We must have an information surge into North Korea. Human rights groups are smuggling DVDs and USB sticks with video about the Kim family's sins into North Korea right now. Balloons are launched across the border with promises of a better life in South Korea. Radio programs broadcast daily messages and news urging North Korea's elite to defect and turn against Kim Jong-un. We know some of these efforts are having an effect. We saw several high-level defections of diplomats, military officers, and the families of North Korea's elites in the last year alone. The number of asylum seekers, depressed for several years by upgraded security efforts in China, have begun to rise. Efforts to get information into North Korea must be expanded dramatically, and Washington should be leading this effort, working primarily with North Korean defector groups in South Korea and other human rights organizations. The North Korean defector group should be front and center in this effort. They know North Korea, and they know the minds of the people. They know what information is needed to permanently tarnish the Kim family cult and what will motivate military leaders to defect. Today's hearing takes place among growing tensions on the Korean peninsula. We must seek all available options to deal with and resolve the issues at hand. I now yield to my good friend and colleague, Ms. Bass, for any comments she might have.
As always, thank you, Mr. Chair, for your leadership on this issue and so many other issues, particularly involving human rights. We know that this is an important hearing on the plight of refugees fleeing North Korea and the leadership role that we can play in protecting their human rights. I also want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to your insight. I would especially like to thank them for their courage and their resolve to testify. We know that North Korea is home to one of the most repressive governments in the world. The UN Commission on Inquiry on Human Rights has called for an investigation into violations that may amount to crimes against humanity. And it is common knowledge that the quality of life for everyday North Koreans is deplorable. They face widespread malnutrition, acute food shortages, and extreme poverty. When it comes to these human rights abuses, Democrats and Republicans agree that the atrocities taking place in North Korea must be stopped. We must continue to pursue bipartisan policies that promote human rights and work with the UN and our international partners to hold North Korea accountable. While our military options in North Korea are limited, we can still advance human rights and respect the aspirations of the people there. One way to do so is through information. North Koreans have limited knowledge of the outside world, but increasing their access to information can help create an informed populace, which will in turn benefit them as well as the international community. I would like to point out that although the number of North Koreans seeking asylum in the U.S. is low, it behooves us to welcome and support those refugees who do reach us, given how much they have already suffered. The people attempting to escape North Korea face insurmountable odds. Most flee to China, where they are likely to be repatriated to North Korean officials and forced into labor camps. Given the human rights crisis in East Asia, we need to act decisively. This is why I'm deeply troubled that despite the egregious reports concerning North Korea and the national security threat it poses, the administration has still not appointed a U.S. ambassador to South Korea. It is critical that we have American diplomats on the ground. I also continue to be deeply troubled and critical of the administration, and in particular, President Trump's juvenile and unprofessional verbal attacks on the North Korean leadership. Like the chair said, the regime, the cults, has to be taken seriously. And my concern is that these attacks, especially the nature of them, calling the North Korean leader names, these attacks diminish our ability to bring about change, and in my opinion, only reinforce the regime's propaganda that the U.S. is waiting to attack. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield my time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bass. I'd like to now turn to Dan Donovan.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield my time so as to allow the witnesses more time to testify. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, I say to my friend. Let me begin by welcoming our first panel. We have two panels today. Ms. Hyonia Gi, who is a North Korean defector, human rights activist, and writer. Her entire family decided to escape North Korea in 1998. Ms. Ji was soon arrested and repatriated to North Korea during the first repatriation in February 1998 and was harshly interrogated and beaten, and witnessed other repatriated North Korean, including adults, children, pregnant women, undergo beatings and invasive searches for hidden money. Ms. Ji escaped North Korea again in April of 1998, leaving behind her younger brother to search for her mother and sister in China. She was caught by sex traffickers and sold for 25,000 Chinese yuan. In April of 1999, she was arrested by Chinese authorities again and forcibly repatriated again for the second time. In November of 2000, she escaped North Korea for the third time. 2002, she was arrested and forcibly repatriated to North Korea again. This time, while 3 months pregnant, upon her arrival in North Korea, she underwent a forced abortion without anesthetics, almost dying from blood loss at the hands of North Korean authorities. Ms. Ji was about to be sentenced without even going through a fair trial, but thanks to a compassionate security officer, she was able to avoid further incarceration, and in October of that same year, escaped North Korea again. Since her arrival in South Korea in 2007, Ms. Ji has been very active as a human rights activist in South Korea and abroad, telling the world of her experience of multiple escapes and forced repatriation. She is currently co-chairperson of the Worldwide Coalition to Stop Genocide in North Korea. We welcome her and are honored to have her testify today. Our second witness will be Ms. Han Ga-hee, who was born in 1980 in North Korea. She studied at an ag college and worked as a laborer at a collective farm. While in North Korea, she listened to the radio broadcast of Free North Korea Radio. The difficult conditions in North Korea and her curiosity led her to cross the border to go to China in 2002. She worked various jobs in China, but was always in constant danger of repatriation to North Korea. After 6 years in China, she saved up enough money to hire a broker to get her to South Korea. After she paid him the money, the broker dropped her off at the border of Mongolia and handed her a compass and told her to head north across the grassland and the Gobi Desert. Alone, she walked for several days without knowing where to go, and finally was found by Mongolian police. Once she reached South Korea in 2008, she went to visit the Free North Korea radio station and learned the truth. All the people working there were defectors who fled North Korea. She has been working ever since for Free North Korea Radio, that's 8 years now, and has become a news announcer and is a producer of a gospel program. We welcome her and are honored to have her testify as well.
안녕하세요. 지현아입니다. 북한 인권에 관심을 가져주시는 미국 의회 하원 모든 여러분들에게 감사드립니다.
Hello, my name is Hanaji, and I would like to express my appreciation to members of Congress for your interest and concern for North Korean human rights.
북한이라는 거대 감옥에서 상백만여 명의 아사는 평범한 일인 것 같았습니다.
In North Korea, the fact that 3 million people starved to death didn't seem out of the ordinary.
자유와 인권이 허락되지 않은 그곳 북한에서 탈출하는 것은 생존하려는 의지 그 이상이었기에 다정한 친구, 사이좋은 이웃, 정든 고향을 뒤로한 채 탈북을 결심하고 국경을 대신하는 두만강에 몸을 맡겼습니다.
The determination to escape from a country that denies its people freedom and human rights was stronger than the will to survive. So I decided to leave North Korea, my close friends, neighbors, and my lovely hometown, and I left my fate up to the Tumen River at the border between China and North Korea.
중국의 문화대혁명을 3년 앞둔 1963년 16살 어린 나이 저희 아버지는 고향 중국을 뒤로하고 자유를 찾아 국경을 넘어 북한에 정착하였습니다.
In 1963, 3 years before the height of China's Cultural Revolution began, my ethnic Korean Chinese father, at the young age of 16, crossed the border into North Korea to find freedom.
1957년 2월 중국 친척 방문길에 한국의 KBS 라디오를 접하게 된 아버지는 지금껏 우리가 속고 살았다며 탈북해야 할 이유를 설명하였습니다.
In December of 1997, he heard radio programs aired on the Korean Broadcasting System, KBS, while visiting family in China. Realizing that he had been duped his entire life, he came back to North Korea and persuaded the rest of us to leave North Korea.
그리하여 1998년 2월 아버지는 자유를 찾아 어릴 때 넘어왔던 국경을 다시 넘게 되었고 아버지는 두만강 상류로 저는 어머니와 두 동생과 함께 두만강 중류로 탈북을 하였습니다.
So in February of 1998, my father crossed the border in search of freedom again into China, and by way of going upstream in the Tumen River, and my mother and my two younger siblings, we escaped via lower part of the river downstream.
미리 정한 장소에서 만나려고 했던 아버지는 가족을 기다리다가 탈북자 색출 작업을 하던 중국 공안들 때문에 현재까지 19년째 행방을 알 수가 없으며 저와 엄마와 두 동생은 바로 북송이 되었습니다.
We were supposed to meet him at a predetermined location in China, but he was soon arrested. That's what we determined, and we have not known of his whereabouts for the last 19 years. And my mother and two siblings and I were also immediately arrested and repatriated.
북송된 후 탈북했다는 이유로 구두발로 폭행당하는 엄마를 봐야 했으며 돈 검사를 받는다고 앉았다 일어났다를 100번 가까이 강제로 해야만 했고 수많은 기관에서 사상 비판을 받았습니다.
Afterward, I witnessed my mother being kicked with hard shoes for defecting, and we were forced to sit down and stand up nearly 100 times, doing the squatting motion in the process of being inspected for any illegal contraband, especially money. And we were subject to very severe thought criticism at the numerous agencies of the North Korean government.
마을 사람들과 친구들의 눈길은 따뜻하지가 않았습니다.
And of course, our neighbors and friends gave us the cold shoulder.
신앙의 자유가 허락되지 않은 북한에서 엄마를 통해 받게 된 작은 한국 성경책으로 인해 저는 보위부에 끌려가 고문을 받아야만 했고 길에서 주웠다고 거짓으로 이야기하자 비로소 풀려나게 되었습니다.
I was taken to and tortured at the Ministry of State Security for keeping a small Korean language Bible given to me from my mother. Because in North Korea, they don't allow freedom of religion, I was released only after lying that I found it on the ground after severe beating and torture. And my mother and younger sister went to China and were supposed to return in a couple of days, but they were kidnapped and sold.
이틀 있다가 오겠다던 엄마와 여동생은 중국에서 식량을 가지고 오던 중 인신매매꾼에게 납치되어 팔렸습니다.
And they went to China in search of food to bring back to the family, but they were arrested and sold into this human trafficking situation.
이제 겨우 17살이었던 여동생은 강제로 팔려야만 했고 40 넘은 사람과 결혼해야 했습니다.
And my younger sister, who was only 17 at the time, was sold and forced to marry an ethnic Chinese man who was over 40 years old.
10살 된 남동생을 홀로 남겨둔 채 저 또한 인신매매꾼에게 강제로 팔려가게 되었고 1년 만에 북송되면서 최악의 북한의 인권 실태를 알게 되었습니다.
I myself was also trafficked, and so my brother lost all of us when he was only 10 years old, when he was left back in North Korea. When I was repatriated a year later, that was when I began to witness the worst of North Korea's human rights atrocities.
송진 집결소에서는 임산부들에게 하루 종일 힘든 일을 시켰습니다.
At the Cheongjin detention facility, pregnant women were forced to do hard labor all day long.
북한에서는 혼혈을 인정하지 않기 때문에 중국에서 임신되어 온 임산부들을 일을 시켜 강제 낙태하게 합니다.
Because North Korea does not allow for mixed ethnicities, they make women, repatriated women who became pregnant in China, to miscarry by forcing them to do hard labor.
저녁이면 임산부들의 비명소리가 들렸고 아기들은 엄마와 마지막 인사 나눌 틈도 없이 숨을 거둡니다.
At night, we heard pregnant mothers screaming, and babies died without being able to see their mothers.
해당 안전부 구치소로 갔을 때는 1년 전 헤어졌던 엄마가 북송되어 있었습니다.
I was reunited with my mother, whom I had not seen for a year, when I was sent to the provincial police jail because she herself was also repatriated.
이곳에서 안전원들의 폭행으로 인하여 현재 오른쪽 갈비뼈가 올라온 상태입니다.
And because of the abuse and torture that I received at this facility, my bones in my rib were not healed properly, and as a result, I still suffer from that beating.
저는 또 엄마와 헤어져 재판도 없이 증산 11호 교화소로 가야만 했습니다.
I was soon separated from my mother and then sent to the Chungsan Re-Education Camp Facility number 11.
이곳은 사람이 살아서 나가지 못하는 곳이기도 했습니다.
This is a place where people that went in did not come out alive.
저를 비롯한 많은 사람들이 하루 종일 노동에 시달려야 했으며 부족한 식사로 날 메뚜기를 잡아먹고 배추를 주워 먹고 개구리와 쥐를 껍질 벗겨 먹기도 했습니다.
This is a place where people were forced to do hard labor, and because of lack of food given to the inmates, they were forced to eat locusts or skin live frogs and reptiles and rats and eat that to make up for the deficient food that was given to them.
사람들은 설사로 인해 바싹 마른 상태에서 숨을 거두었습니다.
And many inmates died from malnutrition and from suffering from diarrhea.
숨을 거둔 모든 사람들은 비닐로 감싸서 수레에 싣고 꽃동산이라는 곳에 묻히지만 곧 개들의 먹이가 됩니다.
Almost everyone who died were buried at a place that we inmates called Flower Hill, but everyone knew that the dead bodies ended up being food for the dog belonging to the guard that kept watch over the burial site.
그 개들은 꽃동산을 지키는 할아버지가 키우는 개들입니다.
And these dogs belong to the guard that was placed there to watch over the dead bodies.
증산 11호 교화소에서 저는 선생님의 말에 순종을 제때 못한다는 이유로 강목과 구두발로 맞아 폭행당해 간질과 섬유 근육통이라는 불치병을 지금 가지고 있습니다.
At the Chungsan Re-Education Prison Camp number 11, I was beaten with a wooden bar and kicked for not obeying commands on time. And as a result of this beating and other mistreatment, not only did I suffer broken ribs that didn't heal properly, but to this day I suffer from chronic illnesses like epilepsy and fibromyalgia.
1년형을 받고 갔지만 김정일의 생일 2000년 2월 16일을 맞아 남은 형을 감면받고 8개월 만에 퇴소하면서 북한 인권의 실태를 국제사회에 알려야 한다는 일념으로 세 번째 북송을 하였습니다.
I was given a one-year sentence but was pardoned after 8 months on Kim Jong-il's birthday on February 16th, 2000. And I escaped again, knowing that I had to tell the world about North Korea's human rights realities.
허나 저는 임신 3개월 만에 다시 세 번째 북송되었고 해당 보안소에서 마취도 없이 강제로 수술당하여 낙태당했습니다.
However, I was arrested and repatriated in China again for the third time and sent back to North Korea, this time 3 months pregnant, and I was forced to undergo an abortion without any medication at the police station in North Korea.
그렇게 저희 첫 아기는 세상 밖을 보지 못한 채 미안하다고 말할 시간도 없이 떠나갔습니다.
So my first child passed away without ever seeing the world and without any time for me to even say sorry to my child.
제가 출혈이 못지않고 거의 죽을 상황이었는데도 보안소에서는 저를 재판도 없이 함흥 55 교화소에 보내려고 서류 작성하고 있었지만 감사하게도 담당 보안원이 저의 건강 상태를 고려해 병보석 출소하게 하였습니다.
Even though I was hemorrhaging to death, they were filling out papers to send me to the Hamhung Re-Education Prison Camp without even a fair trial. Thankfully, there was an officer on my case who took pity on me and let me be released from the prison due to my condition.
저는 아픈 몸을 이끌고 다시 두만강에 몸을 실었고 중국으로 가야만 했습니다.
Even though I was in terrible health, I crossed the Tumen River yet again to go into China.
왜냐하면 저는 증산 11호 교화소에서 죽은 사람들의 눈을 감겨주며 약속한 것이 있었습니다.
I had to do this because I vowed to myself and I made a promise to the people that I saw at Chungsan prison camp that I would survive and live the life that they never got to live.
꼭 살아서 당신들이 못다한 삶을 살겠다고.
And I made this vow crossing into China because I wanted to tell the world what they experienced and to tell the people that I would survive and live the life that prisoners in Chungsan never got to live.
저는 1998년 2월 첫 탈북하여 2007년까지 3번의 북송과 4번의 탈북 그리고 8개월의 교화소 생활을 마치고 중국에서의 타양 생활을 끝내고 2007년 한국으로 입국하였습니다.
Between my first escape from North Korea in February of 1998 and 2007, I was repatriated 3 times and escaped North Korea a total of 4 times. I spent 8 months in a re-education center and some time in China, which was a foreign place to me, before finally reaching South Korea in 2007.
저는 엄마와 딸을 중국에서 미얀마를 통해 한국에 입국하게 하였지만 두 동생과 아버지의 소식은 알 수 없었습니다.
As soon as I arrived, I arranged for my mother and her daughter to come to Korea via Myanmar, but I had no news about my 2 younger siblings and father.
그러던 어느 날 동생이 한국으로 입국하였습니다.
Then one day, my brother arrived in South Korea.
엄마는 13년간 헤어져 꽃제비로 살았던 남동생을 안고 울기만 하였지요.
And my brother had been on the street alone for 13 years, and we could not do anything but hold him, embrace him, and cry.
그리고 그 다음 해인 2011년에는 17살 때 헤어진 여동생이 31살 된 나이로 태국을 거쳐 한국으로 입국하였습니다.
And the following year, in 2011, my little sister, who was only 17 when I last saw her, made it to South Korea via Thailand at the age of 31.
14년 만에 만난 여동생을 안고 우리 가족 모두는 울고 또 울었습니다.
And so we were reunited after 14 years of separation, and we wept with joy.
다시는 헤어지지 말자고.
And we vowed that we will never be separated again.
지금 이 시간 아버지가 많이 보고 싶습니다. 많이
Right.
그립습니다.
Right this moment, I miss my father terribly.
저의 이 그리움이 저만의 그리움이 아닌 모든 탈북자들의 그리움이고 탈북 병사가 남한으로 질주하던 그 모습은 2,500만 명의 북한 주민들의 자유를 향한 질주입니다.
And this longing that is not unique just for myself. It is a longing of all North Korean defectors. The recent case of the running of the defector soldier across the joint security area represents a dash toward freedom that is the dream of 25 million North Korean people.
북한은 하나의 무서운 감옥입니다.
North Korea is one terrifying prison,
김씨 일가는 이곳에서 대학살 만행을 하고 있습니다.
and the Kim regime is carrying out crimes against humanity in North Korea.
이 무서운 감옥에서 살아남는다는 것이 기적일 뿐입니다.
And it is only a miracle that people, and I myself, survived the hellish experience of the prison camp.
허나 중국 정부는 자유를 찾아 떠난 탈북자들을 이 무서운 감옥에 보냅니다.
However, the Chinese government continues to send North Koreans seeking freedom back to this prison.
지난 11월 4일 중국에서 체포된 4살 아이는 엄마와 함께 남한에 있는 아빠를 만나러 가던 중이었습니다.
November 4th of this year, a mother and her child were detained on the way to meet their father in South Korea, in China.
곧 만난다는 기쁨도 잠시 중국 정부는 이들을 끝내 잔인하게 죽음으로 내몰았습니다.
The excitement of meeting his father was momentary because the Chinese government sent them back on a deadly path back to North Korea.
문화대혁명을 겪은 중국이 북송된 탈북자들이 북한 정부로부터 어떤 탄압을 받을지 잘 알면서 보낸다는 것은 살인하는 것과 무엇이 다른지요.
China, which has lived through a so-called cultural revolution, is well aware of what happens to repatriated defectors and
Sure.
how they will be treated. Yet it continues to send North Koreans back. How is this different from murder?
중국 정부는 이 살인의 길인 탈북자 강제 북송을 멈추길 강력히 호소합니다.
And I strongly urge the Chinese government to discontinue and stop the forcible repatriation of North Korean refugees.
그리고 아버지를 비롯한 북송되어 감옥에서 눈을 감은 모든 분들과 현재 감옥에 있는 사람들, 모든 북한 주민들에게 사도 바울이 복음의 빚을 졌다고 고백하듯이 자유를 먼저 찾은 저도 빚진 자임을 고백하면서 유엔 관계자분들과 또 세계 모든 인사들께 또 미 하원 의원들께 가질 권리조차 주어지지 않은 북주민들과 북송된 탈북자들의 자유와 인권을 위하여 적극적으로 나서주시길 바랍니다.
Much like the Apostle Paul, who says in the Gospels that he is in debt for the gospel, I confess to my father and to those who have died in prison after repatriation and to all North Koreans that I am in debt for my freedom. And so yesterday I asked the UN officials, and today I asked members of Congress and other people gathered here in the world, throughout the world, to fight for the freedom and human rights of North Koreans and repatriated defectors who do not even have the right to know or the right to own anything and who have no freedom at all in North Korea.
제가 쓴 시집 마지막 선물 중에 시 하나를 읊어드리려 합니다.
I will now read a poem that I wrote for a book of poetry that I wrote in memory of the prisoners that died in the prison camp.
제목 정말 아무도 없나요?
And it is titled, Is Anyone There?
무서워요. 거기 누구 없나요?
I'm afraid. Is anyone out there?
여기 지옥인데 거기 누구 없나요?
This is hell. Is anyone out there?
아무리 애타게 불러도 아무도 점은 열어주지 않네요.
Despite my urgent pleas, no one is opening the door for me.
거기 아무도 없나요?
Is anyone there?
정말 우리의 신음소리 들어주세요.
Please hear our cries.
짓밟히는 우리의 아픔들 들어주세요.
Hear the pain of us getting stepped on. Is anyone there?
거기 아무도 없나요?
Is anyone there?
사람이 죽어요. 내 친구도 죽어가요.
People are dying. My friend is dying also.
불러도 왜 대답이 없나요?
I am calling and calling. Why is there no answer?
거기 정말 아무도 없나요?
Is there really no one there?
감옥의 문은 밖에서 열어야 한다는 네덜란드 시인 좁 디그너의 말처럼 감옥 밖에 있는 미국을 비롯한 한국 등 국제사회가 북한의 문을 여러 가지 방법으로 열어야 할 것을 호소합니다.
There's a poet, Dutch poet by the name of Joop Degenaar, and he said, the doors to prison must be opened from the outside. And so I appeal to you, to the United States, to South Korea, to all of us here, to find many ways we can open the doors to North Korea.
그리하여 나중에 북한이 해방되어 북한 주민들을 만났을 때 자유를 먼저 누린 당신들이 우리를 위해 무엇을 하였냐고 물을 때 옳은 일을 했다고 말할 수 있길 바랍니다.
And when you meet people from North Korea, once it becomes a free country, and the people of North Korea ask you, what have you done as early beneficiaries of freedom that we did not have? All of us will have a good answer in reply to those North Koreans.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
Ms. G, thank you very much for that very moving and inspiring testimony, and also your challenge to each of us to do more. There are all of us out there, but there needs to be more of us, and we need to raise our voices even more effectively and louder as we go forward. So thank you for that call. Ms. He?
안녕하세요. 이 청문회에서 증언할 수 있도록 해주신 미 의회 의원님들께 진심으로 감사드립니다. 저는
Hello, thank you very much for this opportunity to be a witness in this hearing.
저는 중국에서 인신매매 손에 걸쳐 가진 고생 끝에 믿을 사람 하나 없이 어둠에서 헤매던 저에게 빛이 되어준 것은 그 누군가 건네준 한 권의 성경책으로 자유의 빛을 알고 대한민국에 탈북한 한가희입니다.
My name is Kai Han. I escaped from North Korea into China, and in China I was human trafficked. And while being trafficked, I was given a Bible, and the Bible became my light. And eventually I found my way to South Korea, and I am here before you.
중국 신심상골 남자에게 강제로 시집을 보내려고 하고 싫다고 하면 칼을 목에 들이대고 죽이겠다고 하던 그 두려웠던 상황들을 생각하면 지금도 치가 떨립니다.
I am still living the fears that I had back in China. I had a knife put to my neck, and the choice was either that I get married to a Chinese man living in the countryside, or else. Those were the choices I had, and those are the fears that I still live every night.
세 번 팔려갔으며 세 번째 만에 기회가 생겨 탈출을 하였고 추운 겨울날씨 눈 위에 발자국을 남길 수 없어 작은 도랑물을 걸었던 차가운 기억과 공포들이 저의 마음을 지금도 울리고 있습니다.
I was caught 3 times, and I was sold 3 times. And after the third time that I was human trafficked, I found an escape. What I did was, since this was during winter time, at -30 Celsius, I had escaped to ensure that my footsteps would not be found. So I had to walk in the little stream that was there, and as a result, I had frostbite.
아직도 발가락은 곧대의 상처로 동상을 입어 겨울이면 통증에 시달리고 있습니다.
And those frostbites are keeps on reminding me of what happened. Every winter, I get them back.
이런 두려움과 아픔은 저뿐만이 아니라 지금도 중국 땅에 많은 탈북 여성들과 어린 아이들이 겪고 있는 상황입니다.
However, this is not something that I myself am the only one living with. It's something that many of the refugees from North Korea are living with, and also especially true for children from North Korea.
이 두렵고 어려운 상황들을 무사히 넘기고 자유의 땅 대한민국으로 오게 된 것은 하나님으로 인해 현재 제가 근무하고 있는 자유북한 방송을 중국에서 들었기 때문입니다.
What I had led was a very harsh life, and what I had to endure were very dreadful. But for me, there was hope. The hope came in the name of freedom, free North Korea radio.
처음에는 현재 제가 일하고 있는 자유북한 방송이 남조선 안기부에서 북한 사람들을 강제로 납치해 선전용으로 꾸러기 위한 작전 프로그램인 줄 알고 있었습니다.
When I had initially heard the broadcasting on free North Korea radio, initially I had thought actually this was some sort of a propagation by South Korea, possibly by the National Intelligence Service of South Korean government, in order to lure North Koreans into South Korea.
북한에는 선전 영화가 하나 있습니다. 심리작전이란 영화인데 남조선에서 북한 사람들을 정보만 빼고 죽이는 내용을 담은 영화입니다.
There is a movie that's widely shown in North Korea. It's called Psychological Warfare. Basically, the story goes, South Korean government lures North Korean people into South Korea, takes their intelligence, and kills them all.
그때 당시 저는 이 영화를 보면서 정말 믿고 있었습니다. 나뿐 아니라 모든 북한 주민들이 다 믿고 있었습니다.
When I watched the movie, I truly believed this was what was taking place, and not just me, but I believe other North Koreans also believed that to be true.
중국에서 자유북한 방송을 들으면서 제일 인상에 남았던 것은 나는 성혜림이 친구였다를 들으면서 김일성, 김정일의 여자 관계 진실과 거짓을 알게 되었습니다.
Well, one of the programs that was quite impressive to me when I heard in China about broadcasted by Free North Korea Radio was about Song Hae-rim. The title of the program was "I Am Friend of Song Hae-rim." Song Hae-rim is a wife to Kim Jong-il, and in that program, I heard about all the women that the Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung had around them. And all the womanizing that took place.
우리가 숭배하고 아버지로 받들던 이들의 이런 쓰레기임에도 충격이었지만 또한 놀란 것은 북한에서 특공대를 파견해 암살해 죽였다던 황장엽 선생님의 연설을 들으면서 세상이 어떻게 돌아가는지 우리가 얼마나 까막눈이 되어 살아있는지를 더 잘 알게 되었습니다.
It was a shock to me because these are the very people that we had worshipped while we were in North Korea, but I came to realize that these were rubbish. They were trash of human beings. And also, we had been told that Hwang Jang-yeop, the secretary, had been killed by commandos sent by North Korea to South Korea. However, through the broadcasting, we learned that he was live and well, and I heard his voice and many of the messages that he had sent for us.
하여 중국에서 숨어 사는 신세, 언제 또 북한에 잡혀나가 죽음을 면할지 모를 갈림길에 앉아서 죽는 것보다 공짜가 아닌 자유를 위해 노력하다 죽는 것이 더 나은 삶이라고 생각하고 2008년 8월 라칭판 하나만 가지고 길이 아닌 길을 떠나 사막 땅인 몽골을 걸쳐 8개월 만에 무사히 대한민국에 도착했습니다.
While I was living in China, hiding from the authorities, I really wanted freedom, and I realized freedom was not free, that I could not just sit still and try to get freedom. I had to find my way to freedom. So what happened was in August of 2008, I was given a compass, and just compass. That's all I had. And I walked across the deserts of Mongolia. I believe it was Gobi Desert that I crossed and came, eventually ended up in South Korea.
지금도 중국 땅에는 자유를 찾아 갈망하는 탈북자들이 많습니다. 하지만 이런 탈북자들을 중국 정부는 강제 북송하고 있습니다.
Even today, there are many North Koreans who are living in China, and they want freedom. However, these people are in fear of the Chinese authorities who are repatriating these people to North Korea.
이렇게 강제 북송된 탈북자들은 총살, 정치범 수용소 혹은 감옥에서 혹독한 고문에 시달리고 있습니다.
And when these North Koreans are repatriated back into North Korea, what's waiting for them are not all that pleasant. Many would be sent to political prisons, others would be tortured, and some may even be executed.
제가 탈북하다 잡혀 보이부 감옥에서 15일 동안 있은 적이 있었습니다.
One time I was caught by the authorities, and I was sent to a state security prison. And in the prison, I stayed there for about 15 days.
그때 중국에서 임신된 여성분이 있었는데 중국 종자를 가졌다고 가진 폭행으로 유산을 지켰습니다.
I recall there was a woman who was repatriated from China. She was pregnant, and the guards yelled out that she was pregnant with impure blood, and I believe she was beaten to the point where the pregnancy was terminated.
그렇다고 보이부 요원들이 직접 구타하는 것이 아닙니다. 탈북하다 잡혀온 남자들을 지켜 폭행을 가하게 합니다.
However, the actual beating was not by the guards, but at the command of the guards, the North Korean men who were repatriated, these were the people who were forced into beating the woman.
이 남자들도 살려면 어쩔 수 없는 선택입니다.
And what choice did these men have?
사람의 인권을 마구 짓밟고 짐승보다 못한 쓰레기 정권인 북한이 지난 10일 세계 인권의 날을 맞아 참다운 인권 옹호, 인권 실현 나라라고 주장했습니다.
Well, it's laughable that on the World Human Rights Day that North Koreans would come out and say that they do respect human rights.
21세기 버젓이 공개 처형을 자행하며 인간 존엄을 파괴하고 사람 목숨을 통나무나 석탄보다 못하게 여기는 북한이 말입니다.
Well, North Korea, well, these are the people who would be still to this date carrying out public executions. And also, they consider their residents less than logs or coals.
무엇보다 기본적인 인권 침해는 생명에 대한 위협을 느끼지 않고 굶주림에서 벗어나 기본적인 존엄성을 지키는 삶이 영원하지 못하는 데 있습니다.
Perhaps the biggest abuse of human rights by North Koreans would be starvation that North Korean people are having to suffer, and also the non-provision of the bare necessities that these people need to have as human beings.
먹고 살기 힘들어 어떻게 하나 가정을 지키려고 중국에 갔다 온 채로 저희 아버지는 북한 군인들이 고문해 두 다리를 잃었습니다.
And let me speak briefly on my father, who had to have his legs amputated. He went to China looking for food for us. However, he was caught and later had to amputate his legs for certain reasons.
실어리 하나 걸치지 않고 영하 30도 날씨에 두만강을 마주보고 무릎을 꿇게 한 다음 얼음물을 몸에 뿌리고 가죽 벨트로 온몸을 내리쳐 피투성이가 되었고 밤새 밖에서 지새게 해 동상으로 다리를 자르게 되었습니다.
And why was it that he had to lose his legs? Well, after having been caught by the guards, by the military, he was sent to a prison. And at the prison, actually, he was facing the Tumen River on a certain night. And he did not have anything on him. He was completely naked. And he was forced to kneel looking towards the Tumen River. It was minus 30 degrees Celsius. And he was beaten by a leather belt. And thereafter, he was left kneeling, looking towards the river for the night. And as a result, he had frostbites, and his legs had to be amputated.
결국 아버지는 시름시름 앓다가 생을 마감했습니다.
And after the amputation, it didn't take long for his life to be ended.
감시와 도청, 고문의 일상화, 감옥 국가이며 출신 성분에 따른 철저한 계급사회, 주민들의 모든 자유를 박탈한 북한 정권이 인권 선언을 거론할 자격이 있는가요? 없습니다.
It is laughable that they would have a declaration of human rights when the regime itself is carrying out all these atrocities, including stratification of people into classes based on who they were born or based on their lineages, and not even providing the basic necessities required for human beings.
김정은이 2011년 말 권좌에 오른 이래 북한 정권의 잔혹성은 한층 더 심각해지고 있습니다.
The ruthlessness of the North Korean regime has gotten even worse since Kim Jong-un has come into power in 2011.
하지만 북한의 포갑적 체계는 영원할 수 없습니다.
However, this tyranny cannot last forever. We know that.
김정은이 이렇게 핵위호 모여하면서 공포 정치를 하는 것은 북한은 이미 내부적으로 붕괴되고 있기 때문입니다.
And the very reason why he carries out these politics of fear is because there's collapse that's taking place internally in North Korea.
이번에 총상을 입고 공동경비구역을 넘어온 북한 군인을 비롯한 자유북한 방송 청취 소감을 전달하는 탈북자들의 증언을 들어보면 더 잘 알 수 있습니다.
And this is very apparent by hearing from North Koreans who have escaped. One would be the very soldier who had escaped through a joint security area not too long ago. And then there are other North Korean refugees who have been interviewed by our radio.
저희 자유북한 방송은 장점은 북한 사회를 가장 잘 아는 탈북민들이 직접 방송에 참여해 남과 북의 경험을 설명함으로써 북한 주민들에게 더 가까이 더 현실적으로 북한의 진실, 거짓, 독재 국가의 만행을 확실하게 전달하고 있다는 것입니다.
And what we do at the Free North Korea Radio is to listen to the refugees. We use their voices and we compare the lives of North Koreans and South Koreans and also tell the truth about what takes place outside of North Korea.
북한 내에 최고의 네트워크를 가지고 있고 북한 정부의 엘리트로부터 북한 주민들까지 북한의 모든 지역들의 정보들을 입수 유입을 지니고 있습니다.
And what we do is we have network of people in North Korea, including elites of North Korea, who would be providing intelligence and information to us, and those information are disseminated through broadcasting.
USB, SD카드, 노트텔 1만 3천 대, 라디오 400대 등으로 기독교 관련 자료와 방송 자료, 대한민국 발전상과 드라마, 한류 열풍을 일으킬 수 있는 노래, 춤 등으로 북중 접경 지역을 통해 전달하였습니다.
Included in our activities are not just the broadcasting, but also sending materials to North Korea, into North Korea, by way of crossing the border between China and North Korea. We have sent many USBs, SD cards, CD players, and radios to North Korea.
또 최근 입국한 탈북자들로 진행한 인터뷰에서 자유북한 방송을 들었다고 증언하는 사람들이 5에서 10%를 차지합니다.
And of the refugees that had been surveyed, 5 to 10% of people have stated that they have actually heard broadcasting through Free North Korea Radio.
모든 정보를 유별 차단하는 북한 땅에서 5에서 10%는 엄청난 숫자입니다.
We're talking about North Korea. They are completely eliminating a flow of information from outside. When you say 5 to 10% of people have heard, that's a lot of numbers.
매일 10분씩 진행하는 성경방송은 북한 3분자를 받드는 칭송가를 예수님 찬송가로 편곡해 방송하고 있습니다.
And also, for 10 minutes per day, we have music that's played, but this is actually a play on words because we use the North Korean music, but we change the lyrics so that it's not about Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il no longer.
예를 들어 우리 아버지 김일성을 우리 아버지 예수님으로, 장군님만 믿고 따르리를 예수님만 믿고 따르리로 편곡하여 들려주고 있습니다.
For example, there would be a music titled "In My Father's Footsteps," and we would switch the word "Father" into Jesus, and also that we trust in the general. The general would be changed into "In Our God."
이런 노래를 흥미롭게 자연스럽게 따라하다 보니 김정은이란 존재는 없어지고 예수님, 하나님, 아버지를 알고 있는 사람들이 많다고 탈북자들은 증언합니다.
By changing the tunes that are familiar to North Koreans, but also by using the tunes that are familiar to North Koreans, but changing the lyrics, it's gotten easier for us to get the information into North Korea and into the heads of these people.
현재 북한에서 살고 있는 주민들도 전해오고 있습니다. 저희 어머니도 북한에서 살고 있지만 저희의 영향으로 아침에 눈을 뜨면 하루를 무사히, 저녁에 잠자리에 들면 무사히 하루를 보낼 수 있어 감사하다고 하나님께 기도하곤 합니다.
My mother still remains in North Korea, and I have heard through certain people that she's doing okay, and that she is also in worshiping of the God that I believe in.
일부 북한 젊은이들 속에서는 우리 조선만은 특색 있는 자본주의 국가라며 비난하기도 한다고 합니다.
So the sarcastic saying is that North Korea, amongst North Korean people, is known as a capitalistic society with a twist.
이런 결과만 봐도 북한에는 상상할 수 없는 내부 붕괴가 일어나고 있다는 것을 규명할 수 있습니다.
And what that tells us is that there is tremendous internal collapse that's taking place in North Korea.
김정은 또한 자기 독재가 무너지고 있다는 걸 잘 알고 있기에 공포 정치로 정권을 지키기 위해 최후 발악을 하고 있습니다.
And that is why Kim Jong-un is ruling by fear. He knows that his control and grasp on North Korean people are slipping.
앞으로
If I could just interrupt 1 second, and I would ask you to continue your testimony momentarily. Just to ask a couple of questions. I have to leave. One of my bills, HR 3655, is on the floor in about 5 or 10 minutes. I will come back as soon as it's over. Dan Donovan, thankfully, has agreed to take the chair. So please come back. But I would want you and Ms. Ji to address, if you would. You have said that Kim Jong-un, it's even worse. Suzanne Schulte, who is the Seoul Peace Prize laureate, who has testified numerous times before this and other committees of Congress, points out that it's even worse under Xi Jinping because of his policy. So it's worse in China, it's worse in North Korea under Kim Jong-un. If you could elaborate on that, it would be very helpful. If we were a panel of Chinese leaders, what would you say to them, especially it is illegal for them to forcibly repatriate North Korean defectors pursuant to the Refugee Convention, to which, as we all know, they are signatories to. And finally, if you could speak to the issue of the cult of Kim, the godlike cult that they, and Juche, that they inculcate beginning from the earliest years. How did you break out from that? Since the propaganda is ever present, and all other than the great work you're doing, the information flow almost never happens during all of those formative years, so people come to believe that Kim is God. If you could speak to that. And I will have to read your answers on the transcript as I run off to this hearing.
Can she finish her prepared statement?
Of course. Please finish it. Exactly.
제가 강력한 대북제. 네. 하여 이럴 때일수록 인권과 자유를 잊고 사는 북한 주민들을 위해 더 많은 정보가 유입되도록 다양한 정보 투입 수단을 통해 주민들의 한멸과 각성을 이끌어야 한다고 생각합니다.
And in times like these, it's more important that in times like this, it's more important that we get the right information into North Korea. So we need to make sure that there's a steady flow of information into North Korea, so that people in North Korea would come to realize what's really taking place out there.
하여 이 자리를 빌어 미 의회 의원들에게 간곡히 부탁드립니다. 미국 정부와 미 의회가 북한의 정보 위반 활동에 많은 관심과 후원 지원을 부탁드리며 지원을 해드리면 북한은 5년, 1년도 아닌 북한 독재 정권이 무너지는 것은 내일이 될 것입니다.
And so my focus is really on information flow. We need to have more information, more truth be told to the people of North Korea. We need to have this information flowing into North Korea. And in this regard, we seek help from the U.S. government and the U.S. Congress. And I hope and I believe once we have this information going into North Korea, that the collapse of North Korea would be not in distant future, but tomorrow.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. He. I'm not too sure if you remember the chairman's questions. He wanted those answered so he could read the transcript. So I'd ask Ms. G if you would answer the chairman's questions first, and then Ms. He, you could answer the questions as well.
답변을 질문 기억나세요? 한 5개 정도 있습니다.
질문이요?
네. 이제 김정은 관련돼서 우상 숭배를 어떻게 깨뜨릴 수 있는지 새누리당은 많은 사람들.
저는 이제 중국 지도자들이 지금 제 앞에 있다면 그 첫째로 중국 인신매매를 중지할 때에 대해서 강력히 요구할 것입니다.
So I'll answer the congressman's second part of the question, which was if Chinese leaders were sitting in front of me, how I would address them. And first thing I would tell them is that the Chinese government must stop the policy of forced repatriation of North Korean defectors back to China.
지금 중국 공안들까지도 인신매매로 인해서 돈을 벌려고 브로커들이 데리고 가는 탈북 여성들을 가로채서 본인들이 직접 다른 브로커한테 팔고 있는 그런 자행들이 일어나고 있습니다.
And North Korean defector women have become sort of commodity in the sense that when they're being led away by unscrupulous Chinese brokers, the Chinese security apparatus members, some of them, they would intercept this transaction and they themselves would get involved with the human trafficking and in turn sell the women to the highest bidder, to other brokers. So this is happening in China right now among the security people of China.
저도 그렇게 중국 공안들이 이제 저를 이제 잡아서 이제 다시 팔려는 그 와중에 제가 이제 소리를 질러서 이제 겨우 빠져나왔습니다.
And I myself experienced exactly that. I was actually being in the process of being sold by the Chinese security officials, but because I was screaming and resisting so much, that's how I was able to escape when they were sort of stunned at my resistance that I showed to them when I was undergoing this treatment.
탈북 여성들은 물건이 아닙니다.
North Korean defector women are not commodity. They're not material goods. They're human beings.
중국 공안들까지 나서서 이렇게 인신매매하는 것은 정말 국제사회가 용서치 못할 정말 큰 죄인 것 같습니다.
And the fact that the Chinese government officials, security officials are, some of them are being involved with this is something that the international community should not forget or forgive.
두 번째로 중국에서 강제 결혼이 되어서 또 임신까지 된 탈북 여성들, 국적이 없는 이 탈북 여성들이 중국에서 출산을 하면 아이가 국적이 없습니다.
And the second thing that I would tell the Chinese officials that are sitting in front of me in this room would be that the North Korean defector women who are forced to marry the Chinese men, the mothers themselves are basically stateless, but when they become pregnant by the so-called Chinese husband, the children that they bear, they are stateless either. They have no identity. They don't exist according to the Chinese government.
지금 중국에는 아이를 낳고 북송된 탈북 여성들이 많은데 그 아이들은 혼자 중국에 남아서 국적도 없이 그렇게 어렵게 살고 있습니다.
And in China right now, the mothers of these children, many of them have been repatriated back to North Korea. So you have a lot of kids who are either orphans or who do not have mothers, or they basically are not cared for. So a lot of these children born to Chinese fathers and North Korean defector women are living in a very difficult situation in China right now.
중국 정부는 이 아이들을 한국으로 보내지 않으면 중국에서 국적을 하루빨리 해주길 원합니다.
And what I would desire is that either process these children to be sent to South Korea or grant them some sort of identification or citizenship in China to these children born to Chinese husbands and North Korean defector mothers.
그리고 중국 정부는 유엔에서 지정한 탈북자들을 난민으로 인정할 때 대한 것을 그런 조약을 지키길 원합니다.
And lastly, I would urge the Chinese government to keep its promise as a signatory to the convention relating to status of refugees, and to faithfully carry out its duties as a signatory to that convention by protecting the North Korean defectors that come into China instead of repatriating them.
아까도 언급했지만 정말 탈북자들이 북송되면 정말 죽음을 면치 못할 그런 이제 비인권적인 학대를 받으며 있는데 중국은 정말 이런 것을 뻔히 알면서도 강제 북송하고 있는데 이제는 유엔에서 지정한 탈북자들을 난민으로 인정할 때 대한 것을 받아들이고 중국 정부가 탈북자들을 강제 북송하지 말고 대한민국에 잘 도착할 수 있도록 도와주셨으면 감사하겠습니다.
And lastly, I would say, as I mentioned in my testimony, North Korean defectors, when they are repatriated from China to North Korea, they face unspeakable inhumane treatment, sometimes even death, at the hands of the North Korean authorities. So the Chinese government should accept the North Korean defectors that come to China and process them to be sent to South Korea.
Thank you very much. Ms. He, would you mind answering the chairman's question?
네, 저는 김정은 정권이 왜 김정일 정권보다 나쁜가 이런 물음을 하셨는데요.
You ask how the current Kim Jong-un regime is different from previous Kim Jong-il regime. Well,
강한 공포 정치를 하기 때문에 저는 나쁘다고 생각합니다.
he is ruling by fear, and it's very much of a fear that's being put into the minds of North Koreans.
그리고 어른 철부지가 계란을 바위 깨듯이 세계 강국인 미국에 이렇게 핵도 제대로 되지 않은 핵으로 나서는 것 자체가 저는 어리석다고 생각합니다.
Kim Jong-un is a child who does not know the season, and who in their right mind would want to go up against the superpower that is the U.S. and threaten the U.S. With nuclear capabilities that are not even completely mature.
저희 어머니가 얘기하는데요. 김정일 시대 때는 그래도 명절 때라도 배급을 줬는데 김정은은 아예 배급도 안 준답니다.
Well, my mom tells me when the Kim Jong-il was in power on celebratory occasions, on holidays, that there would be rationing provided by the government. But now that Kim Jong-un is in power, we don't have any rationing at all on any occasion.
또 뭔가 한 번만 잘못해도 무조건 잡아서 죽이는 걸로 공포 정치를 해가고 있답니다.
And the rule of fear or rule by fear is one strike, you're out. There are no generosities to be exhibited.
전 세계적으로 알고 있지만은 정권이 바뀌어가서 엘리트들을 300명 넘게 고사총으로 총살하기는 없습니다. 북한이.
We are not aware of any government upon change of power to have over 300 elites of the government be publicly executed by way of air guns.
이렇게 공포 정치를 해가는 것은 자기가 어린 나이에 자기 자리를 지키려면 이렇게밖에 할 수 없기 때문이라고 생각합니다.
Actually, that would be anti-aircraft artillery. And why? Why does he do that? Because he wants to rule by fear, and this is the way he does it.
김정은은 앞으로도 계속 공포 정치를 할 것입니다.
And Kim Jong-un will continue to rule by fear.
이 공포 정치의 북한 주민들을 구원하려면 북한 내에 이게 한국이 어떻게 발전하고 있고 또 북한 인권이가 뭔지 또 자유가 뭔지 북한 주민들이 머리 사상을 밟을 수 있는 정보를 유입해야 된다고 생각합니다.
The way we will be able to stop the rule by fear is not by restraining him, but alerting and raising the awareness amongst the North Korean people as to what's taking place outside, especially true about South Korea, how much of a freedom and economic prosperity that we live in.
또 북한의 공포 정치를 멈출 수 있는 거는 저는 여기 자리에서 얘기하고 싶은 게 북한만 압박하지 말고 중국한테도 저는 압박을 해야 된다고 생각합니다.
And tying into the question about China, well, in order for us to be able to stop this ruling by fear, the pressure should not be on North Korea alone. The pressure should also be on China.
옛날도 그랬지만 현재도 중국 정부는 북한을 겉으로는 압박한다고 했지만 압박 안 하고 있습니다.
What is true before is also true now, that China and the Chinese people would say that they are pressuring North Korea. No pressure there.
중국이 왜 북한 사람들을 잡아서 강제 북송하는지 압니까?
Do you know why Chinese authorities repatriate North Koreans back to North Korea?
저희 탈북자들하고 석탄하고 통나무로 바꾸고 있습니다.
For each person that's repatriated, there is a return. They get logs and they get coals.
제가 잡혀 나갈 때도 누가 신고해서 잡혔는데요. 저 탈북자 한 명을 북한 사람 한 명을 신고하게 되면 중국 돈 2,000원을 줍니다.
The way I was caught by the Chinese authorities was someone talked about me. It was an informant. And I understand that informant was getting 2,000 Chinese yuan. So per report that they make, they get 2,000 yuan.
제가 그때 공항에서 한 얘기가 있거든요. 왜 나를 잡아가냐고. 잡아가면 좋은 이득이 있나고 보니까 자기네도 먹고 살아야 된다고. 정부하고 정부의 거래라고. 자기는 모른다고 얘기하고 납니다.
So when I was caught by the Chinese authorities, who are known as Gong'an, I asked them why. Why do you have to take me? And why do you need to send me back to North Korea? And what one of the officers had told me was that he had to make a living. And this was an agreement between the governments.
나 잡혀 나가면 죽을 줄 알면서도 강제 북송을 왜 하겠습니까? 중국에서.
They know very well that once we are repatriated, we will be suffering at the hands of North Korean guards.
우리는 죽어도 중국 정부는 석탄하고 통나무를 수입을 해갖고 살아야 된다는 거죠.
So the basic idea, there is a math that we may die once we get back to North Korea, but Chinese people would be getting the logs and coals.
북한의 해상이나 북한 땅이 중국 한 70%는 중국 땅으로 되어 있을 거예요. 북한의 해상이나 북한 땅은 70%는 중국 겁니다. 해상, 바다, 땅.
So about 70% of the North Korean territory and the seas are really actually mined by the Chinese people.
그런데 중국이 북한을 압박하겠습니까? 그리고 통일을 바라겠어요? 안 바랍니다.
So when that is true, would Chinese people really want to put the pressure on North Korea, and would they really want unification on the peninsula?
저희들이 강제 북송을 막아달라. 북한 독재 정권을 무너뜨릴 수 있게 같이 대북 압박을 해달라. 아무리 외쳐봐요. 안 됩니다. 그래서 저는 미 의회에서 세계 강국인 미국이 중국도 같이 압박했으면 좋겠습니다.
So we can talk all day, and we can have all these slogans asking for Chinese to put more pressure on North Korea, but these would be empty slogans. Nothing would come of them. We need to have real pressure that can be felt by the Chinese people.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you, for your opening statements. Thank you for sharing your horrific experiences with us. I'd just like to ask one or two questions, and then we have a second panel. And you've been sitting there graciously for over an hour for us. Is there a difference when we're talking about 70% of the people, refugees from North Korea, are women? Why is that? Why do you feel most of the refugees are women?
북한은 어떻게 여자 수가 더 많아? 그래서 좀 어렵고 이해 대답인데 북한은 이상하게도 남자보다 여자 인구가 더 많습니다.
It's a strange question to answer, but it's a good question nevertheless, because we don't know why, but in North Korea we have more women than men.
또 불과 안 되는 남자들의 인구가 군사복무를 13년씩 하고 나면 뭐 거기서 도피할 수도 없고 뭐 어떻게 탈북할 기회도 없는 거죠.
And also, men are serving in the military. It's mandatory. They have to serve for 13 years. So when you are stuck in a system for 13 years, you're not getting out easy.
그리고 또 여자들은 탈북해서 또 정말 뭐 임신매매나 뭐 여기저기 뭐 식당 가서 알바를 해서 뭐 중국에서 살 수 있지만은 북한 남자들은 일단 중국에 오면 금방 잡혀요.
For women, once we escape to China, we have other means for making a living. We can work in restaurants, and we may even be trafficked, but still we get to eat. But that does not happen for men. There are not a lot of things that they can do in China, and also once they go to China, they get captured a lot easier.
숨어 있는 보호성이 적은 거죠. 숨어 있을 수 있기가 힘든 거죠, 중국에
It's
오면서.
just simply very hard for men to hide in China.
Thank you very much. Ms. G, can I just ask you, you were talking about when women, refugees, then marry a Chinese man and have a baby. Is the baby repatriated back with the mother back to Korea once you're captured? And if so, is there a difference if the child is a boy compared to if the child is a girl?
중국에서 태어난 아이를 동반해서 북송한 것은 제가 못 봤습니다.
I myself personally did not witness the children born to defected women and Chinese fathers being repatriated together with the North Korean defected women back to
네.
North Korea.
다만 이제 북한에서 임신되어서 중국에서 낳은 아이는 같이 이제 북송시킵니다.
However, I am aware that there are cases where the children born to, even though I haven't seen it myself, I am aware that that does happen, where the children born to the defected women and the Chinese fathers are, if they're arrested together, are sent back, repatriated back to North Korea.
그런 아이들은 남자건 여자건 이제 구별 안 하고 차별은 크게 없습니다. 그대로 이제 아이들을 이제 고아원에 놓고 엄마들은 이제 교화소로 보냅니다.
And regardless of whether that child is a boy or girl, there's no difference in the eyes of the North Korean regime. And usually they are sent to an orphanage, and the mothers are sent to a re-education prison camp for punishment.
I was curious if the Chinese saw a difference between a boy being born to a Chinese man.
다른지.
이제 그 남자 아이를 낳으면 다시 못 낳게 이제 수술이라든가 그리고 루프를 해놓게 합니다.
The Chinese family members or the husband, if the mother, the defected woman, gives birth to a boy, they prefer sons, obviously, so they would prevent the mother from getting pregnant again, because if they have a boy, then they're satisfied with that, so they would want to just keep it at that in terms of the viewpoint of the Chinese family, the Chinese husband.
And before I yield to Mr. Castro, if I could just ask each of you, I think you touched on it in your opening statement, Ms. E, but what would you like to see the United States government do?
미국 정부에 뭘 원하는 건지. 그냥 뿌리 벗어.
네, 제가 먼저 하겠습니다. 네, 미국에서 굉장히 이제 당사자인 한국보다도 굉장히 북한 인권 문제에 지금까지 많이 개입을 하시고 또 대북 제재를 비롯한 일종의 이제 그 북한 이제 주민들의 해방을 위해서 또 자유와 인권을 위해서 굉장히 많은 노력을 하신 데 대해서 이제 감사의 인사를 올려드립니다.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the U.S. government for its great interest and concern for the North Korean human rights issue, and also for, in recent days, pressing for the increase and stronger sanctions to punish the North Korean regime. So I would like to express, first of all, my appreciation for that position taken by the U.S. government in terms of dealing with the North Korean regime.
하지만 지금 그렇다고 지금 더 예전보다 좀 더 강한 대북 제재가 더 필요하다고 생각을 합니다.
But I believe a stronger sanctions enforcement should be put in place by the U.S. government towards the North Korean regime.
대북 제재와 동시에 제일 중요한 것이 북한 주민들의 이제 그 정보 유입인데요. 이제 미국 정부가 이제 그 인공위성으로 간절히 바라기는 인공위성으로 북한 주민들에게 인터넷망을 구축해줬으면 좋겠습니다.
And in addition to strengthening sanctions against the regime, the U.S. government should expand and increase the activities of information dissemination into North Korea. And the latest the ways that the U.S. can do that is to provide internet by using the satellite, for example. And that's one way that the U.S. government can help bring information, outside information to the North Korean people directly, bypassing the regime's control.
Missy?
제가 중국에서 아이들까지 강제 복송하고 있나에 대해서 물음에 대해서 한마디 얘기해도 될까요?
Would it be okay if I were to address an earlier question about repatriation of kids?
Yes,
children?
certainly.
애들까지 강제 복송하는 경우가 있습니다.
Yes, that does take place in China.
애를 데리고 내가 밖에 볼일 보러 나갔다 누구 신고를 잡혔을 때는 애가 같이 복송되는 경우가 있고요. 또 단속이 떴을 때 집에 잡으러 갔을 때 애가 엄마를 안 떨어지면 애까지 무조건 차에 태웁니다.
So on under two separate scenarios. One would be if, as a mother, you were caught on the streets with your child, then you would both get repatriated. And also, if there is a raid and the child does not want to detach itself from the mother, then they both get repatriated.
그래서 제가 얘기하는 겁니다. 중국 정부는 뒤에서 그렇게 할 짓을 다 하고 있다고. 그러니까 미국 정부가 중국도 북한하고 똑같이 강한 압박을 해야 된다고 생각합니다. 아무리 저희들이 유엔에서 강제 복송하지 말고 외쳐도 뭔 소용이 있습니까? 이미 중국에서는 할 거 다 하고 있는데요.
And who actually does the repatriation? The Chinese government, and that's what they do. They're smiling behind their curtains, and we have all these slogans, all these empty slogans that are not heard by anybody in China.
이상입니다.
My last question, the committee would like to have, at least on the record, about reports recently that the Chinese government is building at least 5 refugee camps along the border. We're curious whether your sources can confirm that and what you think that may mean.
그거는 이미 지금 뉴스에 나와 있는 건데요. 아직까지는 연산 지역에 확인된 건 없습니다.
I believe that's in the news, but I don't believe that was confirmed yet.
저희 북한 내부 소식통에 의하면 아직 확인된 건 없습니다.
And through our sources, we have not been able to confirm it, so maybe it's not happening.
이상입니다.
네, 저도 이제 확인된 바는 없고요. 다만 이제 전쟁을 대비해서 북한의 난민이 중국으로 이제 북한 주민들이 중국으로 갈 수 있는 그런 이제 계기가 있을 것 같아서 거기에 이제 전기 철조망 해놓고 군인들을 거기에 배치했다는 것은 알고 있습니다.
So I myself, even though I've heard of those reports of the Chinese government supposedly building these facilities, I don't know for sure, but I do know for a fact that through people that have contacted me from inside China and other sources that the Chinese government, they fear a rush of North Korean people escaping from North Korea in case there is a war or some sort of a major event happening. So to prevent that, that the Chinese government on the Chinese side of the border, they have reinforced the surveillance and the security in the region. For example, putting up more electrified fences and strengthening on the Chinese side their mechanisms to prevent North Koreans from crossing over in case of a major event.
I thank you both for your diligence, and I, Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro.
Thank you. Thank you for your courage and your bravery, and also for coming here to testify today. I have a question about the families that are left behind after people leave North Korea, after they defect. How are those family members treated after people leave North Korea?
저는 탈북을 혼자 했고요. 가족들이 전부 다 북한에 있습니다.
I escaped alone. I have my family still in North Korea.
현재 제가 남한에 와 있다는 정확한 정보를 북한에서 모르기 때문에 가족들이 아직 뭐 안전하게 있는 것 같습니다.
I think my family is still safe. That's because North Korean authorities do not really know that I am here.
가족들이 위험할까봐 제가 지금까지 공개 활동을 안 했는데요.
So I have also feared for the safety of my family, and so I have for thus far not worked in open.
11월 달에 저희 엄마하고 통화를 했는데 저희 엄마한테 제가 얘기를 했어요. 제가 이렇게 인권 활동을 하고 있다고, 빨리 통일이 돼서 엄마랑 만나려고 열심히 노력하고 있다고. 근데 공개적으로 얼굴이 나가면 엄마가 정치범 수용소에 가서 죽을 수 있지 않겠냐고 얘기를 하니까
11월 달이죠?
네, 이번 11월 달.
So in November of this year, I had a conversation with my mom. And I told mom that I would like to do more activities in open regarding human rights, and this would bring about unification on the Korean Peninsula sooner. I told him, but I also told her I was very much in fear for her welfare.
하루하루 숨 조이고 사는 지금이 너무 고달프다고, 뭐 이래도 죽고 저래도 죽는 게 괜찮다고, 할 수 있는 것 하라고 해서 제가 자유북한 방송에서 8년을 근무하면서 공개 활동을 처음 하고 있습니다.
And what my mom told me was that each day it's becoming harder for her to breathe, and that she would die one way or another. She didn't care. And she told me that I should do what I thought was the right thing to do. And that is why I am now in the open. For 8 years working for Free North Korea Radio, no one knew of my identity. Now perhaps they do.
And you live in South Korea now?
지금 남한에 살고 계시죠?
네, 저는 남한에 살고.
Yes.
Okay, I have a follow-up question, but I want to give you an opportunity to answer the same question.
저는 이제 가족이 다 아까도 말씀드리다시피 다 왔고요. 이제 아버지만 중국 어디에 계시는지 아직 알 수는 없는데 이모하고 이제 계속 연락이 있고 이모에게 돈도 보내주고 그랬었는데 제가 공개 활동한 지가 이제 10년 가까이 되거든요. 그래서 책도 내고 이러다 보니까 어느 순간에 이제 한 1년 만에 이모가 연락이 안 되고 있습니다.
So as I mentioned in my testimony, all my family members are with me in South Korea, except for my father, who is missing, who has been missing for the past 19 years. And I have been able to get in touch with my aunt, who is still in North Korea. I've been able to send her money and also every once in a while call her as well. But it's been about 10 years since I've been an active human rights activist out in the open. I've written 2 books already. But it's been almost more than a year that I have had trouble trying to get in touch with my aunt. So perhaps the regime has finally caught up to what I'm doing and perhaps did something to my aunt. I don't know. But it's been hard for me to get in touch with my aunt.
You don't know if she's been punished or what happened?
네, 지금 아예 사람을 보내도 그 집에 없는 걸로 지금 확인되고 있습니다.
So I was able to send somebody through using brokers and through sending money to send somebody to my aunt's house in her village. But the report I got back was that the house was empty. There was nobody at that house. So something happened to my aunt. I just don't know exactly what happened to her.
And are you living in Seoul now or in South Korea?
네.
Yes, I am living in South Korea now.
Well, I have a question for both of you. One of the goals for a long time for the people of South Korea, and I imagine many people in North Korea, has been for unification of what for decades now has been two separate countries. And I asked the same question of another defector when we did a larger foreign affairs panel, or the main committee panel a few months ago. Is reunification realistic given the fact that these countries have been separate countries now for many decades? And you have now seen both societies, both North Korea and South Korea. How significant are the differences? Can those differences be bridged for reunification?
제가 이제 남북한 이제 다 경험을 해봤는데요. 이제 북한은 공산 국가고 남한은 자유시장 경제잖아요. 네.
So as you mentioned, I did experience both life in North Korea and now I'm living in South Korea. And North Korea is a communist regime and South Korea is a free market capitalist society.
굉장히 저도 이제 처음에 와서 자유시장 경제에 굉장히 적응하기 굉장히 힘들었어요.
And for me, upon my first time being in South Korea, as I started my resettlement, it was very difficult for me to adjust to a life of freedom and a free market capitalist environment.
하지만 어느 정도 지나니까 민주주의 사회에 정착하게 되었습니다.
However, after some time, I was able to adjust fairly well into this democratic, free society in South Korea.
지금 탈북자들이 한 3만 2천여 명 정도가 대한민국에 정착하고 있습니다.
And so far, there have been up to around 32,000 North Korean defectors that have resettled in South Korea.
한 80%는 저처럼 북한에 가족이 있고 또 북한 가족에게 친척에게 이웃에게 지금 돈을 보내고 있습니다.
And out of the 32,000 defectors, I would say about 80% of those defectors in South Korea, like myself, are able to send money to our relatives and family members in North Korea.
그래서 지금 북한은 거의 이제 대부분이 이제 남한이 잘 사는 나라고 또 그 가족이 남한에 지금 가 있는 그런 가족하고 간부들이 자기 자녀들을 결혼시키려고 한다고 합니다.
And so I've heard from not only the sources in North Korea, but from other sources as well, that many North Korean people in North Korea who have family members in South Korea have an awareness that South Korea is a country that is rich, that is abundant, and that South Korean products are sought after, and that in some cases the high-ranking officials even want to marry off their children to family members of North Koreans who have people that have escaped to South Korea, because that means they're able to get money from their relatives in South Korea. So that's been the sort of shift that's happened in North Korea regarding their views on South Korea and South Koreans.
지금 굉장히 이 남북한의 차이점에 대해서 굉장히 이제 걱정하고 계시는데 지금 북한은 겉으로는 공산국가지 안에 북한 주민들은 거의 다 자유시장 경제의 맛을 보고 있습니다.
And you mentioned the differences between North Korea and South Korea. So I would say that even though North Korea may be a communist country, communist system on the outside, but inside the people, because of the emerging markets and because of the capitalist venture started by many citizens in North Korea, many North Korean citizens are more aware of, and they have become very well attuned to the free market capitalist ideals that we would find in South Korea, for example.
네, 이렇게 되면 북한 정권은 쉽게 무너지고 통일이 올 수 있다는 확신을 가지게 됩니다.
And I personally believe that this will lead to quicker fall of the regime and an even faster reunification of the two Koreas in the Korean Peninsula.
I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank our very distinguished and courageous panel for your testimony, and above all, for your life's work, which has been extraordinary. And someday, when North Koreans are free, you will be among the true heroes who helped make it happen. So thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Dan, thank you for chair. I'd like to now welcome our second panel, if I could, to the witness table, beginning first with Ambassador Robert King. And I want to say a big welcome back to Dr. King, who for so many years sat over here with Tom Lantos as his top chief of staff. So it's great to have Dr. King, Ambassador King, back. He, as I think most will know, was our special envoy for North Korean human rights issues from 2009 to 2017. Since leaving the department, he is senior advisor to the Korea chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. For 25 years, quarter of a century, from 83 to 08, Ambassador King served as chief of staff to Congressman Tom Lantos, when Mr. Lantos became ranking minority member and then chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Dr. King worked, or served, I should say, as committee staff director, and that was from 2001 to 2008. In addition to his full-time jobs, Dr. King has taught courses in U.S. foreign policy and international relations at the University of Southern California, German Study Program, Brigham Young University Study Abroad Program, American University in Washington, D.C., New England College in New Hampshire. Ambassador King is the author of 5 books and over 40 articles on international relations topics. We welcome him back again to the committee. I'd like to then welcome and introduce Greg Scarlatu with the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. He's the executive director of the committee. He has coordinated 20 HRNK publications addressing North Korea's human rights situation and the operation of its regime. He is a visiting professor at the Hankook University of Foreign Studies in Seoul, as well as instructor and coordinator of the Korean Peninsula and Japan class at the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service Institute. Prior to HRNK's, Mr. Scarlatu was the Korea Economic Institute. He was with them. He has over 6 years of experience in international development on projects funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development, the World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank. For 14 years, he has authored and broadcast weekly in the Korean language. It's called the Scarlatu Column, and it's with Radio Free Asia. As a seasoned lecturer on Korean issues, Mr. Scarlatu is a frequent commentator for CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, and other media operations. He has appeared as an expert witness at several congressional hearings on North Korean human rights, and so we welcome him back today as well. And our third distinguished panelist will be Suzanne Schulte, who is also making a trip back and in the past has provided expert witnesses to this subcommittee and other committees of Congress, including, as I mentioned earlier, the first women who were ever trafficked that came forward and spoke at a congressional hearing, trafficked that is from North Korea into China, and it was extraordinarily moving testimony. She is considered one of the world's leading activists in North Korean human rights movement. She has spent the past 2 decades promoting the freedom and dignity of the North Korean people and is currently president of the Defense Forum Foundation, a non-profit foundation promoting a strong national defense and freedom, democracy, and human rights abroad. In 1996, she began a program to host the first North Korean defectors in the United States, giving them a voice to speak out about the atrocities being committed against the people of North Korea, including the political prison camps and the horrific treatment of refugees. She has led international efforts to pressure China to end their horrific repatriation policy and has been involved in the rescue of hundreds of North Koreans escaping their country. Currently, she also serves as the chairwoman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, vice co-chair of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, and honorary chair of the Free North Korea Radio. I welcome all three of our distinguished panelists, and I yield the floor to Dr. King.
Very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be back with you again. Usually I'm sitting on the other side behind you and Mr. Lantos. It's a different position to be down here today, and I'm glad to be home. I want to thank you for your focus on human rights and for what you have done with the subcommittee in terms of calling attention to these issues and problems. I want to commend you on the caliber of the witnesses, the other witnesses that have testified today. It was extremely helpful to have these two women who have, at great difficulty, been able to leave North Korea and talk about their experiences. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with Greg and with Suzanne to talk about these issues. Refugees or defectors who've chosen to leave North Korea is one of the key issues in the broader question of human rights in the North. There's been a steady flow of defectors from the North since the famine of the late 1990s. Over the last 2 decades, some 30,000 North Koreans have fled the country. The vast majority have resettled in South Korea. The concern of Americans to help these defectors from the North was one of the principal factors behind the adoption of the North Korea Human Rights Act in 2004. Since the adoption of that legislation, the State Department and other federal agencies have helped some 250 North Korean refugees resettle in the United States. Most refugees, however, have chosen to settle in South Korea because of the familiarity of language, culture, as well as to join family members who are already there. The number of refugees leaving North Korea annually has recently declined. The high point, about 2011, was some 3,000 annually. But tighter control of the borders by the North, difficulty getting through China has caused that number to fall to less than 1,500 last year. The numbers this year look like they will be even lower. Virtually all defectors who flee North Korea today do so through China. Very, very few have been able to cross the inter-Korean border. A few weeks ago, we saw a very rare exception when a North Korean soldier who was seriously wounded as he tried to escape fled through the DMZ. This indicates both the danger and how uncommon it is for defectors to go directly from the North into South Korea. For those who escape through China, there are very serious problems, from being trafficked, sold as virtual slaves, or being returned to the North. In the past, when relations were good between China and North Korea, most defectors captured in China were quickly returned to North Korea, where they were sent to brutal re-education camps that our witnesses have talked about here. A couple of years ago, I had a particularly memorable conversation in South Korea with a young woman who'd fled the North. She was finally able to reach the South. I asked her if this had been her first attempt. She said, "Oh no, this was my 6th try. 5 times previously she sought to leave. 5 times she was captured either in North Korea before she left or as she crossed into China. She was returned to North Korean authorities, spent many months, each time in a re-education camp where she was brutally treated. On her 6th attempt, she and a friend who was going to leave with her decided to go, but they also decided to take with them poison tablets. Rather than be forcibly returned again and sent into a re-education camp, they would have taken their own lives. In the past, Mr. Chairman, when Chinese relations with South Korea have been good and China's relationship with the North has been strained, defectors have been allowed to go to South Korea. A couple of years ago, in a very highly unusual arrangement, China allowed some 13 or 14 North Korean restaurant workers to fly directly from China to South Korea, where they were resettled. A year or so ago, however, after the United States, with the cooperation and approval of the South Korean government, established a THAAD missile battery in the South, this led to strained relations between China and South Korea. Since that time, it has again been more difficult for defectors from the North to reach South Korea through China. The United States government has strongly supported South Korean efforts to assist defectors to reach the South. On many occasions, I personally raised with senior Chinese government officials our concern that defectors be permitted to flee the North if that was their wish. I know that other more senior State Department officials have also raised this matter with senior Chinese officials. Mr. Chairman, it's important that the United States continue to urge China to allow defectors to resettle elsewhere. And if they wish to go to the South, our government should support South Korean government efforts to help those people. Congressional support for refugees, such as through the reauthorization of the North Korea Human Rights Act, is important, and I urge approval of that reauthorization legislation. It's already been adopted in the House. It's now awaiting action in the Senate, but it's urgent and it's important that legislation be reauthorized. A second matter that I was asked to talk about was the issue of providing free and unfettered information to the people of North Korea. The availability of accurate information about events beyond the borders in the North is extremely important for the North Korean people. It limits Pyongyang's ability to manipulate its own citizens, and we must continue to encourage the free flow of information into North Korea. Although it is illegal to own a radio or television capable of being tuned to stations other than the official government station, based on survey research, we estimate that as many as a third of North Koreans listen to foreign radio broadcasts, particularly programs from Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, funded by U.S. congressional appropriations. These are extremely important. There are other creative and innovative programs which we fund, the U.S. government funds, to get digital information to the North Korean people. These efforts need to be fully funded, encouraged, and expanded. Mr. Chairman, military options against North Korea are severely limited, but one thing that we can do that will encourage positive change in the North is to increase the flow of accurate information from the outside world. Our human rights efforts are an important aspect of our policy towards North Korea. We must not underestimate the value and importance of those efforts. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Ambassador King. Mrs. Carlucci?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the invitation to testify before you and the subcommittee today. It is a true honor and a privilege. The most critical challenge our country faces today is the nuclear and ballistic missile threat posed by the regime of Kim Jong-un. Grateful for the subcommittee's unabated determination to protect North Korean refugees in China, I respectfully urge you to continue to consider the vital importance of formulating and adopting a robust human rights policy, including a North Korean refugee protection policy that can be integrated into U.S. security policy toward both China and North Korea's Kim regime. In 2014, China received a warning by the UN Commission of Inquiry that its policy of forcibly repatriating North Korean refugees could potentially amount to aiding and abetting North Korean perpetrators of crimes against humanity. China has been put on notice that its policies, practices, and support for North Korea are unacceptable. Yet, at the 4th Annual UN Security Council meeting on human rights abuses in North Korea held yesterday, China called for a procedural vote to stop the public meeting. This effort failed, but China persists in its efforts to support the Kim regime, as evidenced by its forcible repatriation of North Korean refugees. Up to 80% of North Korean refugees in China are women. In the absence of any semblance of protection, they fall victim to human traffickers and other criminals. Many of those forced into sexual bondage under the guise of marriage with Chinese men in run-down rural areas are often abused by the would-be spouse and the entire family. Their children's human security is beyond precarious. China denies North Korean children the right to education, health, and personal security, as well as liberty when they're detained awaiting forcible repatriation. Our 2015 HRNK report, The Hidden Gulag 4, documents the particular vulnerabilities of North Korean women jailed in a network of political prison camps, Kwalliso, and labor camps, Kyohaso. Increasingly, these facilities house women who have attempted to flee the country, and here rates of mortality, malnutrition, forced labor, and exploitation are high. China does not uphold its obligations under international law, as evidenced by the forcible repatriation of North Korean refugees in need of protection. China denies many North Koreans the ability to apply for asylum or have safe passage to the Republic of Korea or other countries. China claims that North Koreans are illegal economic migrants. In reality, however, not only are North Koreans targeted for escaping their totalitarian state, but they're targeted by the Chinese government and ultimately victimized again once repatriated to North Korea and imprisoned. It truly is a vicious cycle of political oppression and violence perpetrated against countless innocents. Mr. Chairman, I respectfully recommend the following. First, the United States should urge China to immediately halt its forcible repatriation of North Korean refugees and thus fulfill its obligations under international treaties and customary international law. Second, the United States should call upon China to allow the UN High Commissioner for Refugees unimpeded access to North Koreans inside China to determine whether they're refugees and whether they require assistance. Third, the United States should call upon China to adopt legislation incorporating its international obligations under the Refugee Convention and the Convention Against Torture. It should be expected to declare and uphold a moratorium on deportations of North Koreans until its laws and practices are brought into line with international standards. Fourth, the United States should call upon China to recognize the legal status of North Korean women who marry or have children with Chinese citizens and ensure that all such children are granted resident status and access to education and other public services in accordance with both Chinese law and international standards. Fifth, in the absence of a Chinese response, the issue should be brought before international refugee and human rights fora. UNHCR's Executive Committee, as well as the UN Human Rights Council and General Assembly of the United Nations, should all be expected to call on China by name to carry out its obligations under refugee and human rights law and enact legislation to codify these obligations. Sixth, the United States should promote a multilateral approach to the problem of North Koreans leaving their country based on the principles of non-refoulement and human rights and humanitarian protection. Building on the precedent of other refugee populations, international burden sharing should be developed to protect North Koreans seeking to escape the tyranny of the Kim regime. Seventh, following the passage of the North Korean Human Rights Reauthorization Act of 2017, which mandates the position of the Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights, I respectfully urge the U.S. Congress to encourage the prompt appointment of a qualified candidate. I strongly believe that this particular issue merits the full-time, high-profile focus across various agencies that the Special Envoy has so effectively brought and would continue to bring. And eighth, and finally, additional funds should be appropriated for clandestine information flows into North Korea, for non-governmental organizations working to improve human rights in North Korea, and for the resettlement of North Korean refugees in the United States. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your leadership and for that very detailed set of recommendations. Ms. Schulte. Thank you.
First of all, I know I'm going to embarrass you when I say this, but I can't help it, Congressman Smith. The last time we were together, there were 18 North Korean defectors in your office, and I have to tell you, when we walked out of there, those defectors said, "That is the greatest man we've ever met," because you were so great to them, and you've been focusing on this issue for decades. And so I thank you so much for your leadership on this, for your bringing this hearing together today, and I just wanted to say what a great, awesome person you've been. I'm also really happy to be here with Bob King, whose door was always open, who was always ready to help us when we found about a refugee that was in danger, always willing to speak out from small towns to college campuses and really raise the North Korea human rights profiles, issues as the special envoy for President Obama, and also for my colleague Greg. One of the things on my top 10 list of good things I've done in my life was insisting that he become the executive director of the HR&K. So I'm really glad to be with these gentlemen. So I have a very extended written testimony I've already submitted. So I'm going to be really brief and try to stay within the 5. I think I got this down to 5 minutes, 8 seconds. So anyway, I'm going to make 3 main points. 1, the situation facing North Korean refugees in China is worse than ever. Xi Jinping has brought us to a crisis stage because of his support for the regime. Today, we're relying on China to help us make sanctions effective to rein in Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions. But if China continues to forcefully repatriate men, women, and children back to North Korea to face certain torture, certain imprisonment, and in some cases, execution, what does that tell us about Xi Jinping's sincerity? The international community must insist that China end its cruel, inhumane, and illegal repatriation policy. China's policy, has been pointed out, is a death sentence for North Koreans. And as Ambassador King pointed out, 80%, he talked about the defectors poisoning themselves. We know 80% of North Korean defectors carry poison to kill themselves, and we saw that dramatically happen this summer when the Korean Workers' Party member, his wife and 3 children, committed suicide when the Chinese, on orders by Beijing, ordered them back to North Korea after they begged to be allowed to go to South Korea. The Chinese government continues to not only forcefully repatriate refugees, but refuses to allow the UNHCR any access, but also gives free rein to North Korean agents to hunt down the refugees and those that try to help them. We have seen the murder of Chinese citizens. We've seen the abduction of South Koreans. And what do they have in common? They've been involved in the North Korean refugee movement. So that's the point that we've reached right now with China. China has only 2 choices. It can continue to support the Kim dictatorship, and this will ensure an escalating nuclear arms race in Asia, which could have horrific and devastating consequences, especially for the people of Korea. Or the other choice, which is for China to work with South Korea and the international community for peaceful unification under South Korea and democratic policies. And I just want to give one example. The gentleman mentioned THAAD. I think both of you mentioned the THAAD. Why did South Korea need THAAD? The only reason why South Korea needed THAAD was because of Kim Jong-un's nuclear threats. And this is an illustration of why China needs to decide whether it's going to continue to support this regime or work with South Korea and bring them out the end of the Kim regime. Second point. This is very critical too. We need to recognize what the people of North Korea have done internally and externally to change their circumstances and support the work of the defector-led organizations. They are our greatest allies for peaceful regime change. We all see the pictures of the goose-stepping soldiers and the fawning men and women in front of the Kim statues, and we think it's a hopeless situation. But in this great darkness of North Korea, I see the light of the North Korean people, because those are the people I've been working with over 20 years. The reality is, we must think of this, the reality is that the people of North Korea have accomplished amazing things. It's the people externally who educated us, first of all, about the human rights tragedy, the crimes against humanity, the Kim dictatorships, but it's the people internally who are also educating themselves about the outside world. It's the women of North Korea who internally created the market system and the ones externally who were involved the most in the rescue movement. I know a North Korean woman who's rescued 7,000 North Koreans. I call her the Harriet Tubman of North Korea. North Korean defectors like Park Sung-hak of Fighters for Free North Korea regularly sends in information through balloon launches, and he says, all I'm doing is sending letters home about the truth. The North Korean People's Liberation Front, men and women who served in the North Korean military are sending in information and reaching out to the military in North Korea, citing the examples of what happened in Romania when the military sided with the people against the dictator. Every North Korea Freedom Week, We have a very emotional ceremony with the North Korean People's Liberation Front members, men and women who served in the military, raised to hate Americans, think we caused the war. They go to the Korean War Memorial to lay a wreath, and they pledge to honor the sacrifice that the Americans made for South Korea's freedom by dedicating their own lives to North Korea's freedom. As you heard from Ms. Han from Free North Korea Radio, a radio station founded by North Korean defector Kim Sung-min and staffed by defectors, it's broadcasting every day. It's the most popular single program broadcasting in North Korea. And one of the exciting things we do for Free North Korea Radio is create programs for them to communicate to the people of North Korea that we're not their enemy. One program includes messages from members of Congress in which we simply ask members to send their hopes and dreams to the people of North Korea. The response from North Koreans to this program was absolutely amazing. During this year's North Korea Freedom Week, defectors brought portraits made of members of Congress, including our distinguished chairman here today, Congressman Smith, and Congressman Royce, the chairman of the full committee. These portraits were smuggled out. They were made in Pyongyang by two brothers. It took them 3 months, and the portraits came out with the message, "Tell the American politicians who delivered the messages, my brother and I spent 3 months making them late into the night. Please tell them there are some people in a dark place who still have hope." And you know how beautiful they were, the most beautiful portraits, artwork I've ever seen. They shimmered. The defectors tell us that if they had the resources to carry out their work of getting information in and out of North Korea, the regime could end in 3 years or less. Otherwise, it could survive for another 5 to 10 years. My third and final point, we must keep the human rights issues at the forefront, and Greg mentioned the importance of the human rights up front approach. We have to keep our concerns for the people of North Korea at the forefront, especially now with the escalating threats of Kim Jong-un. Otherwise, we play directly into Kim's propaganda that justifies his nuclear ambitions, that we are their enemy and the enemy of the people of North Korea. We must communicate to the people of North Korea that what the United States wants for them is to enjoy the same freedoms that South Korean Americans enjoy. The defectors keep repeating this to us. The truth will set them free. Support the work of the defectors. Help them get the information to North Korea. And I'm presenting to you this book today called The Accusation. This is the only dissident book from North Korea. It was smuggled out at great risk to those involved. It was smuggled out. It was published in English earlier this year. The author is still living in North Korea, and he chose to use the pseudonym Bandi, B-A-N-D-I, Bandi, because Bandi is the Korean word for firefly. And he says he is the firefly shining a light out of the darkness of North Korea. He's just another example of the people of North Korea who are another light shining out of this darkness. He's just another example of another North Korean risking his life just to get this message from his homeland to you. Thank you very much.
Schulte, thank you very much for your extraordinary leadership over the course of over 2 decades. It really has made a difference. I do have a number of questions, but I'll try to keep them a little bit brief. If any of you would like to speak to the issue of the cult of personality, which I think is grossly underappreciated by the Pentagon and by many of the people within our own military, we know that when people believe that they're serving a god, in this case a demigod, someone who is actually doing horrific things but claiming to be God, certainly his grandfather did, that the sense of extremism and obsession almost knows no bounds. I know a lot of Americans, when they see documentary footage of people crying so profusely they think it's orchestrated, people tell me, including experts like yourselves, it's not. They really do, okay, they can gin some of that up, but so much of it is from the earliest years inculcated into the minds and hearts. And I did ask our 2 previous witnesses, how did they break free of that? And the truth does set you free, but it has to be applied over time, which is why broadcasting and other means of communication is so important. But if you could speak to that whole issue of Juche. I've read one book about it by a Christian who said, you've got to understand why they are so fanatical and why they will die in large numbers for Kim, whoever the Kim might be at that time, which we, again, underappreciate. The sense of being able to reason effectively goes out the window. So I just Ask you if you could speak to that first, and then I'll get to some other questions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Indoctrination begins at a very early age in North Korea. It begins at the precognizant age. Babies in the cradle are taught to point fingers to the pictures of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il on the wall. Laws are on paper. North Korea has a constitution that even provides for freedom of religion and freedom of expression, labor legislation, a criminal code, but in practice, none of these laws are applied. North Koreans do not know the international obligations that North Korea has assumed by ratifying, for example, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, or their own legislation. The only principles that govern each and every aspect of life in North Korea are the 10 principles of monolithic ideology, as evidenced in our recent research and publications by Robert Collins. Each and every North Korean has to participate in weekly 생활 정화 ideological training sessions, self-criticism sessions. This is very much part of life. During those long years that all men and many women spend in the military, indoctrination is taken to the next stage. One has, of course, to remember that the age of revolution in Budapest 1956, Prague 1968, or Bucharest 1989 was late teens, early 20s, mid-20s. That's the age when each and every North Korean man is in a military uniform. By the time they're done, the age of revolution has passed. Juche, of course, this is North Korea's self-reliance ideology. On the surface, it sounds very different from Marxism. Marxism basically preaches that ownership of the means of production is the main driver of history. Juche claims that the individual is the main driver of history. We had a senior fellow, resident senior fellow, very nice lady, born and raised in North Korea. She used to be a professor of Juche thought in North Korea. Now she's a university professor in South Korea. She would tell us every time we asked her about Juche, don't worry about Juche. The sole purpose of Juche is to worship the leader, to solidify the leader's personality cult. Basically, the individual makes sense. Individual life only makes sense for as long as it's lived as part of the Commonwealth. Life makes sense only if it's lived for the sake of the supreme leader. As to information campaigns, these critical information campaigns that we launch into North Korea must surely be cognizant and fully knowledgeable of the different cognitive processes in North Korea. We must be fully cognizant that education is very different, worldviews are very different, the way North Koreans approach ideas is very different, so we're much better off if we have former North Koreans in charge of working on content and delivering this content, perhaps in collaboration with other organizations, but they must definitely be involved in this process.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I think we need to be careful of is I'm not sure that the North Koreans are as indoctrinated as we would sometimes think. Barbara Demick, in her book, Nothing to Envy, talks about what life was like in North Korea. And one of the very telling incidents she cites is a particular family and how they dealt with the death of Kim Il-sung in 1994. The mother told the daughter, at school today, you're going to have a memorial service for Kim Il-sung. You have to cry. You must have real tears. If you can't cry, spit in your hand and wipe it on your eyes so that everyone will know that you're crying. They understand, and they can see that. It's a society where to deviate becomes so difficult that people who may have different views or see different things don't talk about it. because of the nature of the society. So I think this is not a place where you've got to convince people that other things are true. This is a place where people need to have an opportunity to do that. The key thing is making sure that we get information into North Korea that provides an alternative explanation of what's going on in the world. And that, again, is the importance of news broadcasting and information dissemination. That is where we need to make sure that there is funding for Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, and for the programs that are being developed to do that.
Ms. Schulte.
Well, first of all, I just want to tell you, I totally agree with you that the understanding of the Juche ideology is something that's completely underappreciated. One of the witnesses we had during North Korea Freedom Week this last year was from Pyongyang. She was part of the elites. She and her mom ran a restaurant, had the good life. She said that when Kim Jong-il died, they thought they were all going to die. And I think maybe the Juche belief system is probably more powerful in Pyongyang because it's the elites that are there, and they're more actually more isolated than people like, for example, in the border regions. But I think it's very important controlling system in the brainwashing from the start. But it's really focused on the fact that the Kim family are God, and that's what the Juche. What's become is the worship. Juche has really become the worship, not the self-reliance that Hwang Janyap, who was the author of Juche, established, but the worship of the Kim dictatorship. And Hwang Janyap, interestingly pointed out when he defected, he said the way to break the Juche ideology is with the Holy Spirit. He actually became a Christian before he died. And he was very involved with Free North Korea Radio, and Ms. Han cited the programs where these are the programs that are done to worship the regime. The songs that are meant. They've changed the wordings of the songs, and Greg mentioned the importance of the messaging. That's exactly the kind of thing to change the to go at that belief system directly with truthful information. And this is one of the clever ways that the North Koreans are being able to do it. But I do think it's very important that we realize the cult of personality that's part of this Juche, and the brainwashing that starts from the very moment they're children, when they're even math problems, or how many American GIs did you kill when you threw a grenade. I mean, this just starts at the very beginning. We need to be aware of that. I'll finally say that the first defectors we brought over, one was an Army captain. This is back in 1997, Army captain and a colonel. And they got up from the audience and they were like, none of you guys look like wolves, and your nose are a lot smaller than I thought they were going to be, because all Americans are supposed to have these long, crooked noses anyway. But it's just part of that brainwashing that we need to be aware of, and that's why getting information is so important.
Mrs. Scalato, you underscored that up to 90% of the North Korean women and girls in China fall prey to traffickers in China who sell them into sexual slavery. As you might know, I'm the prime author of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and I tried for years to get China designated as a Tier 3 country, an egregious violator, in part because of the exploding sex trafficking within mainland China, but also in large part too because of so many North Koreans who were so horrifically abused. And again, Ms. Schulte provided us with several witnesses over the course of several hearings who were themselves trafficked and told their stories again before this committee. This year, the administration, the Trump administration, has designated China Tier 3. And in the narrative explaining that, great focus is put on this trafficking problem. They're not in freedom. They are in another kind of slavery that they are trying to escape from in North Korea. So my question would be, because we do have votes now, so I'm going to ask a number of questions so that we can finish before the voting is over. But if you could speak to that, we're at the sanctions part now. Tier 3 has been designated. At the time and place, anytime, any day now, the administration could announce a series of sanctions towards China. What would you recommend that we do? There's a lot on the plate that could be imposed, and I think that a designation without a sanction weakens the designation significantly. Secondly, on the issue of refoulement, which you spoke to in your testimony. We know that the periodic review is coming up in November of 2018 under the Refugee Convention. NGOs can begin submitting in the spring, but it seems to me, this ought to be an engraved invitation for every one of us to make China's sending people back to death. They're taking poison to avoid it, and certainly to torture and mistreatment in the Gulag system. This is an opportunity to begin even right now, and your thoughts on that. And of course, there are some, under customary international law, there are other obligations to which China is obliged to. Any thoughts along those lines? There was a report today of 5 refugee camps. You heard it earlier, mentioned to our 2 previous witnesses. Is that because China thinks something is going to happen vis-a-vis a war? Or is this just another modality of control that they're seeking to impose? And the ICC, which unfortunately has had a very checkered 2 convictions in 14 years. The International Criminal Court has not been that robust. But it seems to me, as you have been saying, and the commission, the UN Commission has found, or at least would lead us to believe, when you're complicit in these crimes, you're complicit. And it would seem to me that not just North Korea, but the prosecutors should be looking at China's complicity in this terrible death spiral that they are on now. So if you could speak to that. I have many other questions, but we will run out of time, so please.
Mr. Chairman, certainly there is ample evidence of the abuse that has affected North Korean women in China for more than 2 decades now. We have to take that leap, link China directly to the egregious human rights violations affecting North Koreans, and in particular affecting North Korean refugees. Perhaps we need to take a hard look at certain areas, certain industries, certain areas of the economy that are more closely related to this issue of North Korean refugees in China, the lack of protection, the vulnerability of these refugees, China's refoulement of North Korean refugees. Take a very hard look at areas that could be perhaps subjected to sanctions. As far as the refoulement issue is concerned, we often hear the question as to why China is so reluctant to provide protection to these North Korean refugees. I would take the liberty of sharing a thought with you. Perhaps China is afraid of a development similar to the European picnic of the summer of 1989, when Hungary opened its border to East Germans, and this outflow of East Germans out of East Germany was one of the fundamental factors that ultimately brought about the fall of the Berlin Wall. Clearly, if there is one step that China can take to make a huge difference, a very significant difference, that would be to stop the forcible repatriation of North Korean refugees. The International Criminal Court, the referral of the Kim regime by the UN Security Council to the International Criminal Court, was one of the fundamental recommendations made in the February 2014 report of the UN Commission of Inquiry. North Korea is not a party to the International Criminal Court. The problem with the Security Council is that the P5 members, the permanent members, have veto power, and China is one of them. The Russian Federation is, of course, another one. So we face the prospect of a Chinese or Russian veto. Where we are right now is that for a 4th time yesterday, basically the North Korean human rights issue was placed on the agenda of the UN Security Council. Now, placing the issue on the agenda is a procedural matter that requires 9 out of 15 votes of permanent and non-permanent members. Once the issue is taken up, it becomes substantive and it becomes subject to a veto by one of the P5 members. Another possibility that has been raised by international human rights NGOs is the creation of a special tribunal through the General Assembly. The toolkit of accountability is a complex one, and pursuing the avenue of the International Criminal Court is just one of many avenues we can consider. Thanks, sir.
You raise an interesting question about dealing with the Tier 3 sanctions on China. The difficulty of looking at sanctions as a key on these issues with the North Koreans is that, again, we're in a situation where we're trying to get the Chinese to solve the North Korean problem for us because we have such limited abilities to do it. This is our problem with sanctions on the nuclear weapons, and we're going to be in trouble if we take that same route on the human rights thing. There's a real link between sanctions on trafficking and repatriation. The reason why these women are trafficked is because they will be repatriated if they don't have some way to hide their presence there. And if we can move the Chinese in a direction where they're going to allow the North Korean refugees to leave China, we don't have to worry about sanctions for trafficking because there won't be a trafficking problem. These women will leave. So I think we need to sort of look at it in a way that will allow us to work with the Chinese and try to put some pressure on them to make some progress on repatriation, rather than saying, let's slap more sanctions on the Chinese. It's an issue that's not easy, it's an issue that's complicated, but it's an issue that's connected, and we need to figure out how to do it. And I think that's the difficulty of dealing with China. We don't like what the Chinese do. We don't like their human rights record. We don't like their obstacle in dealing with the North Korean human rights issue or the North Korean nuclear issue. The argument has been we're probably better to try to work with the Chinese because they are suffering from the same problems, and if we can work with them, maybe we'll have some progress. It is helpful to have the threat of sanctions because it's very clear that the sanctions on nuclear weapons are successful because the Chinese are beginning to enforce them. And the Chinese are beginning to enforce them because we have imposed sanctions on the Chinese for not enforcing them. So we need to kind of balance that process out. But I think where we need to focus as U.S. government policy is not just on the nuclear weapons issue, but also on the human rights issue, because that's the key to opening up North Korea.
Before I go to Ms. Schulte, Andrew Natsios testified before our subcommittee a couple years ago, and that was precisely his major point, that we have delinked human rights from the nuclear issue in the same way we did it with Iran. And if it's a sidebar issue or something that's done out in the hallway, it doesn't get done. And when we fail, as we have failed, unfortunately, on the nuclear side, what do you have to show for it? People's human rights have not been advanced. So
Exactly.
your point's well
That's why
taken.
we need a special envoy for North Korea human rights to make sure that that is part of the discussion. Yeah.
Well, for bringing up sanctions, I did want to say one thing about North Korea sanctions, which has been reported, because you brought up the topic of sanctions. Free North Korea Radio and other entities have reported that the people of North Korea, one of the big worries that we all had with the sanctions against North Korea is not wanting to hurt the people of North Korea, that it would be very carefully targeted at Kim Jong-un and the elites. And what we're hearing now is not only have the sanctions not hurt the people of North Korea, but they're actually doing better, because there's products that they can't export that they're having to dump on the North Koreans. So all these costs have gone down. So I wanted to talk about it. But on the sanctions regarding China, first of all, I want to start out by saying this. I think we have really failed the people of China, and I hope that we don't continue to fail the people of North Korea, but I think we've really failed the people of China because we've turned it back on the many horrific human rights violations that are happening against the people of China at all different levels, and this has been going on for decades for all our, I would say, economic greed. And I would cite two experts on this, Dr. Greg Autry, the professor who wrote the book Death by China, and explores the intellectual property theft and the things that the Chinese, and I'm talking very specifically about the regime in China, have done and profited at the expense of the American people. And also Dr. Yang Jingli, who I know you have had, who's been just an amazing leader in the Chinese human rights movement, but we have not, we've betrayed people like them that are fighting for the human rights of the people of China as well. And so I think any kind of sanctions or pressure on the Xi Jinping regime is critically important. He is culpable. He is committing crimes against humanity. And on the refugee camps, those are rumors we've been hearing off and on for decades. Why do we need refugee camps? Just let the UNHCR go in there and start letting these people go. And I remember one time when there was a plane load of North Koreans that the Chinese allowed to leave. It was in the summer, because I remember I was on vacation. It was probably like 10 years ago. But they let a plane load go. And RFA called me up, tracked me down on vacation, and said, Suzanne, do you think the Chinese are changing their policy? They're sending a whole plane load of North Koreans back to South Korea. And I said, not unless the planes keep flying. And there was not any more flights. So I'm not sure about this refugee camp, but there's not a need for one. North Koreans are the only refugees in the world that have a place to go for immediate resettlement because they're citizens of South Korea under Article 2 of the South Korean Constitution. They're unlike any refugees in the world. And I know we have refugee crisis going on because of tensions in the Middle East and in North Africa, but North Koreans don't. We have Hanawon. That's their refugee camp. So, and then finally on the fear of the refugees, China fearing refugees. Here's the thing. If China fears being overwhelmed by refugees, if it showed some compassion, all it's doing is lifting off the pressure on Kim Jong-un that's causing all the tensions to begin with, and relieving him of any reason to reform so that people don't want to leave. Talk to North Koreans. They don't want to leave their homeland. They love their homeland. They're only leaving because of the horrific human rights violations of the dictator there. So what China's doing is prolonging the dictatorship by forcing them back and being complicit in crimes against humanity by forcing them back. And I think that more and more Chinese are recognizing this. They're speaking out that the future's with South Korea. I believe that China fears having a strong, unified democracy on its border, and that's the reason why they're continuing to send the refugees back. They just don't want to see Korea unified. But I always point out that if the regime collapsed, there's not going to be any refugee problem. The thing you're going to have to control is people trying to go there. And I always tease the pastors because the pastors are going to be, the Methodists and the Presbyterians are going to be fighting to plant their churches. All the, Hyundai and everybody else is going to be going there to build plants. All the Korean Americans are going to be going home because most of them are from, that's their ancestral homeland. And that the real fear is what we'll have to concern about is protecting the development in North Korea and protecting the North Korean people once that regime's gone from the flow of people coming in. Oops, sorry.
Thank you. We've heard instances of UN agencies approving technology transfers to North Korea in violation of UN sanctions, and the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, has had problems with that, and we've raised them. I actually had a hearing in February of 2016 on that. We've written letters, and it's come to very little outcome. Your thoughts on that? It seems to me that, for sanctions to work, it's not just the countries, but it's also UN agencies that need to be in compliance. Your thoughts?
Chairman Smith, I believe you're referring to an agent called Tabun, and the North Koreans were actually licensed to produce it. It's one component needed in the production of chemical weapons, I believe. Our organization, the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, has focused more on the humanitarian arm of the UN. And one point that we have tried to make times and times again is that UN agencies involved in humanitarian operations inside North Korea should be fully cognizant of human rights concerns, of the UN Commission of Inquiry report, the recommendations of the UN Commission of Inquiry, and apply a human rights upfront approach to their work. And I will take the liberty of giving a very quick example. Last year, we documented a prison camp, number 12 in Cheonggori, North Hamgyong province. In the aftermath of Typhoon Lion Rock, the UN was conducting a fact-finding mission in the vicinity of the camp. We managed to acquire satellite images through the cloud cover, proving that the camp had been affected by the flooding caused by Typhoon Lion Rock. We urged UN agencies to include the most vulnerable segments of the population, especially prisoners, in their fact-finding missions and humanitarian operations in North Korea. One example, for example, the World Health Organization has a program called Health in Prisons, applied throughout the developing world. Why not seek ways to apply some of these programs to North Korea? One positive aspect here, although action on the ground is lacking, is that senior UN officials were very responsive, including at the time the Deputy Secretary General, and in his most recent report, the UN Special Rapporteur on North Korean human rights, in the DPRK, Mr. Tomas Ojea Quintana, did specifically mention the need to address the most vulnerable in North Korea, including prisoners.
Thank you for what you did, having a hearing to focus on the UN problem. UN agencies are like any big bureaucracy where you have people who aren't aware of what is going on in other places. They are, however, very attentive to what U.S. Congress has to say, and I think your efforts are extremely useful in dealing with these kind of problems with UN agencies not being aware of sanctions and so forth. Thank you.
Ditto.
Let me just ask, Ms. Schulte, you said it's worse now under Xi Jinping. Ms. He said it's worse under Kim Jong-un. It seems like it's been worsening since 2011, Dr. King. If I could, go back to your testimony where you said it reached a high, now it's gone down. It's less than 1,500 last year, and it could be even worse this year. How much worse can it get before the Security Council? Well, they may never do it because of the veto, but others, I'm a great believer in hybrid courts. I've been pushing for 4 years that there be a special court for Syria and Iraq. Got a resolution passed, had a series of hearings on it. We had the former prosecutor for Sierra Leone testify at 2 of those hearings, and then, of course, they put Charles Taylor behind bars for 50 years. And so it shows that the hybrid courts get results. There's imperfections, but they do get results. The ICC often doesn't, so I think your point was well taken, Mr. Carlotto. That there are other alternatives, and they have been put on the table. I think we should pursue that aggressively. We still may run into the Security Council problem, but even the effort might have some mitigating effect on the Chinese barbaric behavior and, of course, the parallel barbaric behavior by the North Korean government. So your thoughts on that?
The International Bar Association held a proceeding in the last couple of weeks ago looking at what information is there about crimes against humanity being committed in North Korea. They concluded that there is sufficient solid evidence on the 10 of 11 crimes against humanity to hold individuals in North Korea responsible. I think we need to focus on this idea of accountability. I think we need to go as far as we can. I think it's useful to have the Security Council debating and discussing the human rights situation in North Korea, even if we aren't going to get a vote out of the Security Council. It raises the issue to that level. It puts pressure on the North Koreans, and we need to continue that effort. I think what you were trying to do with Syria is something that would be worth trying to do with North Korea.
I met a young woman who escaped with her 14-year-old daughter. This was about 7 years ago. And she told me that when her 14-year-old daughter got repatriated, they got to China, they got arrested, her 14-year-old daughter they got separated, the 14-year-old daughter got repatriated and beaten to death by a border guard. And when I heard that story, I was so horrified. How could any man beat a 14-year-old girl who was simply trying to have a better life? But at that point, I started pushing the South Korean government to convene a tribunal, because at that point, the South Korean Human Rights Commission had already collected 532 cases of these types of abuses where the people knew, gave testimonies. But when they put that report together, they never released the names. And I think one thing was really encouraging that Ambassador King was involved with during President Obama's administration was starting to naming names of the perpetrators of these crimes, which I think is so important. But I do think, and we were part of the ICC coalition that pushed for the UN Commission, the UN Commission of Inquiry that's pushing for the ICC referral. However, we can't wait. And even if he got prosecuted at the ICC and the ICC determined he was committing crimes against humanity, well, he could still be a dictator. It might not have any impact. So we've got to look at other ways. And I've always believed that the hybrid court, whatever, there's got to be a procedure to start talking about these issues. And because I think we need to put people in the regime on notice, they've got to wake up every morning. The people that are keeping this regime going, they got to wake up every morning they have two choices. Total devotion and loyalty to Kim Jong-un, or having their brains splattered along with their family by anti-aircraft weaponry. I mean, that's what they face every day. So how do you get that to stop? You've got to tell them you're going to be held accountable for your crimes. But at the same time, you've got to reach out to them through programs like Free North Korea, through the defectors, because there's defector elites who are reaching out to other elites and showing them that there is another alternative, there is another option. But I think proceeding on these kinds of legal courts is absolutely important, is critical to put pressure on them to show them they're going to be held accountable. It's got to be a way to stop that border guard from beating to death a 14-year-old girl when his name gets mentioned in a South Korean tribunal. But also, Bob cited the International Bar Association. They did did release their report, which found that this morning the crimes against humanity, meaning all the statutes, almost every single statute. I think there was just one that were lacking the evidence, but the evidence is there of the crimes against humanity being committed by Kim Jong-un.
Let me ask you, and maybe it'll be the last question. You've been very generous with your time. How would you rate the effectiveness of the Human Rights Council towards China? I remember when it was called the Human Rights Commission. I traveled frequently to Geneva, would try to lobby people on particular issues, including China. I actually went to a China press conference and asked some questions about human rights, and they shut it down. They were so unwilling and so brittle when it comes to criticism. They just ended the press conference because they didn't want to answer serious questions about human rights. I've met with Prince Zaid, the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I'm deeply disappointed, and I would appreciate your thoughts one way or the other. Maybe you think he's doing a good job. When it comes to Israel, they are obsessed with holding Israel to account for things that, for instance, settlements. Security Council Resolution 2334 makes it criminal, illegal for certain settlements, and Abbas is now petitioning the ICC to open up a case for prosecution. Are you kidding me? Then you have gross violations of human rights being committed every day with complicity by the Chinese, but also with complicity with the Chinese. There's very little, a statement made here or there, but it's never offensive in the terms of trying to hold them to account. I think it makes the credibility of the Human Rights Commission suspect. They cannot be politicized. We know that there are rogue nations who make a beeline to sit on the council in order to run interference to their own accountability that being held, and they work in tandem with each other to keep the rogue nations not focused upon. So if you could speak to that, and particularly to Prince Zaid, because his blacklist is coming out very shortly of companies doing business with entities that would be in what they falsely call occupied territory, and I say falsely because I believe it's false. But it's a very, very bad omen, I think, for the council to be so politicized and then look askance when it comes to China. Your thoughts?
There's nothing more frustrating than trying to deal with the Human Rights Council. On the one hand, they have a very high-minded goal and objective. On the other hand, the realities of politics are constantly getting in the way. Israel is one of the most troubling of issues because the votes are in the wrong place, and it becomes a very difficult problem. The one bright light with the Human Rights Council is the treatment of North Korea. North Korea has not sat on the Human Rights Council, has never been elected a member of the council. North Korea has gone through the Universal Periodic Review process. They've been under some pressure because of that process, and there have been some indications of improvement in non-controversial areas like assistance for people with disabilities and that kind of thing. The North Koreans, we have been able to get out of the Human Rights Council every year since 2004 a tough, strong resolution that is critical of North Korea. We've been able to refer things to the General Assembly. We've been able to get such tough, strong resolutions. As far as North Korea is concerned, the Human Rights Council is a good instrument. As far as Israel is concerned, it's not.
But what about, I mean, even today, December 11th,
Yeah.
Prince Zaid has called for North Korea to be referred to the, to the ICC.
Yeah.
That is an easy lift. That's not all that hard to say that.
No.
But what about its accomplice, China? And I appreciate your thoughts, too.
The issue with China is more complicated. China is a permanent member. It can veto anything
But
of
this is his
substance in the
recommendation.
council.
I mean, they could reject it,
Yeah.
but the credibility and gravitas that the High Commissioner would bring to saying, hey, you too, China, we're
Yeah.
not letting you off the hook. You are complicit in these horrific crimes.
Yeah. It's a tough one. You're a politician. These countries are dealing with politics. We're making progress. We're not there yet. I think we need to continue the effort, and we need to continue to criticize the way you and other colleagues in Congress have done to put pressure on the UN agencies for what they are not doing. But I think we should also be careful not to throw the baby out with the bath and praise them for what they've done in areas like what they've done on North Korea. I think we made real progress on that.
And I would, before we go to Greg, we ought to remind everyone and begin assembling lists. I mean, we've just recently passed the Frank Wolf International Religious Freedom Act. I did sponsor it. And it calls for designated persons, people that we can hold to account. The Magnitsky Act, certainly the Global Magnitsky, gives us an incredible tool on a vast array of human rights issues to say so-and-so, 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 and begin honing in on the individuals who commit atrocities all over the world. We got the CPC designation, both China and North Korea, under the Religious Freedom Act. So sanctions can be levied there. And then, of course, we have the Trafficking Victims Protection Act sanctions, Tier 3, where they can be levied there as well. So we got all these tools. Let's use them. Please, Greg.
I fully agree with Ambassador King that there is serious tension between the lofty goals, ideals, and principles and standards that the UN Human Rights Council is supposed to uphold and the politicization of the Council. It's highly politicized, of course. As a human rights NGO dealing with the UN and UN agencies, my colleagues and board members know that it's extraordinarily frustrating many times, most of the time, to deal with UN agencies. And yet, as Ambassador King said, if there is one success story of the UN Human Rights Council, that was the establishment of the UN Commission of Inquiry through a resolution that didn't even go to a vote. It was passed by consensus by all 47 members of the Human Rights Council. So North Korea is, after all, the saving grace of the Human Rights Council, if I may say so. And we do hope to continue to see good action on North Korean human rights issues.
Thank you. Schulte.
Yes. I think we need tremendous reform at the UN. I think in some cases it's a joke. The Human Rights Council, why can't we have a Human Rights Council where the membership is based on the countries observing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Just a few of them. I mean, let's reestablish what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights stood for, and let's have, you can be on the Human Rights Council if your country, well, maybe at least 60%. How about just 60%? I'll give you a D- to be on the council. It's ridiculous that what's happening. And while it's a bright light on North Korea, but I'm not sure that it's done anything. It's done nothing, actually, to improve the lives of the people of North Korea. The lives of the people of North Korea have not improved. We just know more about it. That's all that's happened. We just know how much they're suffering. If there's been any change in their reality, it's because of the people of North Korea, not because of the dictatorship, and certainly not because of anything that the UN's done. So it may be a good mouthpiece on North Korea, but it's failing on the human rights of suffering of so many other people.
You know, I thought in your prepared testimony, you made an excellent point as to how we should honor the fact that the North Koreans themselves, whether they be in country or in South Korea or anywhere else, are really making the difference, and we need to get behind them as never before in those efforts. Maybe you might want to elaborate on that.
Well, why did I show them the portrait? They smuggled it back in. They smuggled it back into the hearing. This is an example, okay? Once again, this was made in Pyongyang, all right? This is in response to messages broadcast on Free North Korea Radio. Smuggled out at great risk. Two brothers took 3 months to make this. If they'd been caught making this, they would have been executed and their families. So this is just a testament to the importance of reaching out to the people of North Korea.
And what Ms. Schulte is not saying that there's a portrait of herself and one of Chairman Ed Royce as well. So, is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude? And again, thank you for your insights. It gives us a lot of actionable things to do, and I always appreciate that.
Thank you for this hearing.
Thank you, Ambassador King.
Thank you for the hearing. Thank you for your dedication and the inspiration that you provide to all of us.
You inspire us, believe me. And Ms. Schulte, thank you.
Thank you.
The hearing is adjourned.